Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everybody. I think we can start. Morning, guys. How are you doing?
We are doing great, and you?
I'm fine, thank you. I can't complain.
Thank you.
I think we can start with 14 so the other guys can join as we're progressing. But at least we don't waste too much of your time for being early. But thank you for joining, guys. This is day 3 of our class. We've done so far 2 sessions. Today we're going to cover some of the sections from the learner guide, just to add in terms of the HR sphere and how we can use it in terms of our own work and also for purposes of the studies. And then just before I start, guys, I've asked for Talia, I remember there's a question yesterday in terms of question 2 from the learner guide that needed a personal development plan template. He's just confirming for me, and then I'll give you guys feedback, hopefully, before we finish the session. So I haven't forgotten about that question, guys. So just to recap in terms of what we did yesterday, we covered performance management, we covered career planning and training development in terms of understanding how performance management works within HR, what's the relevance of managing the performance of employees, what is the benefit of making sure that we align the performance of our employees to the objectives of the organization, where we first look at performance as a development tool for the person that will be appraising, and also for the organization, where we're seeing in terms of where the organization wants to go and what it wants to achieve. Are we at the levels that we're supposed to be in terms of the outputs that we're expecting from the organization? So making sure that we align. So remember, we went through in terms of when a person starts, what are the things that we need to make sure that we incorporate in the job descriptions so that they understand in terms of expectations from the organizations, so that when they're doing the different roles or the different responsibilities, they're able to know when it comes now to the performance criteria rating, what is it going to be based on? So remember, always have that conversation with your employees from the onset, so that as you're progressing, depending on the intervals of your appraisals or reviews, you have already set in terms of the foundation, the criteria that you're going to base your appraisal on. We also looked at career planning in terms of making sure that as we as employees are progressing in the organization, we have a career plan for them that we've set out and discussed with our employees, so that they understand in terms of the progression of their careers, so that at least they're working towards achieving a certain goal for themselves. Because remember, as employees and even as organizations or as managers, you should be in the habit of making sure that you're growing your employees. You're also trying to guide them in terms of giving them a direction of where their careers are going to go. So always look at that in the back of your mind. And then also looking at training and development, to say through performance management systems, we're using different processes and systems to manage our process. We need to then try and then decide, how do we make sure that we incorporate training in the process? Because remember, we're trying to uplift our employees and make sure that they're growing in the process. So what type of training are we going to implement for our employees, depending on their different needs? Because remember, every employee will have specific needs according to their career plans or what the performance appraisal results stipulate. So depending on that, then you can then decide in terms of what training you're going to use for the employees, right? But also make sure that what are the training practices that you're going to incorporate in your organization, to make sure that the training that you're going to adopt is in line with the goals of your organizations, what you want to achieve, right? And also what the department has to work in terms of its strategic goals for the department, and what the nation wants to achieve for the different departments. So from the training methods, looking at how do we use maybe on the job training, do we use internal trainers, offsite trainers, what is the best option? Does a person need a mentor for them to improve in terms of their skills or the experience, or do they need coaching depending on what level are they within the organization? And just trying to understand in terms of making sure that you have a training plan for your employees. Because remember, in terms of requirements from from the skills plan to say that from your workman skills plan, you should be able to make sure that your employees have a stipulated training plan that they have on an individual basis where it's showing progression of the employee in the organization. So those are some of the areas that we discussed yesterday in a nutshell, just to give us a foundation or where we've come and where we're supposed to be going. So just remember to always go through the study guide when we finish, so that you also try and add in terms of what would have done in the class. Because remember, we do a summary of some of the things from the study guide, but you give yourself enough time to go and then read them in detail. So today we're going to do 3 of the sections. Morning, Andile. Thanks for joining. Oh, Andile is in a meeting. Okay, Andile, noted. You can always listen to the recording, but if you can't access the recording, just guys read. You can always just read and follow what the POE needs. But at least the learner guide will give you the basis and the foundation of the module, plus your experience. Because remember, we said that HR is something that we experience on a daily, and we're exposed to it. We're employees, we're managers, we're owners of different organizations. From there, we're able to relate to what the module talks about. Today, we're going to look at reward recognition, right? Reward and recognition practices within organizations, to understand what rewards are about, where do we bring in recognition? Because remember, employees join organizations on a basis of compensation, right? And also driven by what is the additional package that I'm going to get on top of the normal salary that I get. So it's important then to try and look at what are the different reward systems that you can put within organizations, and also how do you recognize employees' efforts? Because remember, employees are motivated by different things. Some are motivated by monetary basis, some want recognition. So depending on what type of employee you have to make sure you understand from their behaviors, from your interactions, what's the best compensation package that you can give your employees, and also what are the different reward incentives you can put in for your employees. In your organizations, guys, do you only get compensation just salary, or you have different reward systems that operate within your organizations? Because you might say within let's take for example, in maybe in a sales environment where you get commissions, right, in terms of extra effort, in terms of meeting targets, or even just in a normal environment where sometimes organizations might say that if a person goes over and beyond their stipulated responsibilities and is able to assist other employees in terms of meeting their goals, then the organization might say, okay, we'll give you a bonus, or we'll give you a certain reward, depending on how the different policies are in terms of rewards. In your organizations, do you guys have systems for rewards?
Most definitely. Sales environment.
Pardon? Yes, fine.
In a sales environment, most definitely financial recognition. Target driven.
What driven, right?
Target driven.
Yeah. Definitely in a sales environment. That's what I think. It also helps in terms of pushing the numbers. And in other environments, do you guys have reward systems beyond the normal salary packages?
From the business that I'm working in, Lala,
Yes.
before the COVID pandemic, or before we started working from home, because we're still working from home, we used to have like recognition or awards that they used to give employees, like Employee of the Year, and they gave you a certificate plus a certain amount
Okay.
that you receive without besides your salary by towards the end of the year. And also once you have served the company for 5 years and 10 years, they used to give us something for that.
Okay. So now it's been scrapped because of COVID.
Since we're working from home, they're no longer doing that. I don't know why.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, all right. So was it just ad hoc, or it was part of the agreements to say, should you? Was it just on an ad hoc basis?
It was part of the agreement, and also to motivate everyone to push and work hard to any task that you are given in the business.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, thanks guys for sharing. So depending with the environments that you're operating in, it all then is different in terms of how they'll set up their rewards and recognition systems. But it's always important to go back to policy and then also understand in terms of public sector, how does it work when it comes to the reward system? What does your policy say? What does the structure say in terms of awarding employees any rewards within different departments, and what are the procedures you should follow in terms of giving out rewards? Because normally in the private sector, because it's sometimes individuals that own the businesses and they're able to say on an ad hoc basis, let's give out a bonus or let's give out this reward to employees because we feel maybe they've achieved what we didn't expect. So it just depends in terms of the industry that you're in, how they then look at giving out rewards. Jim, let me just mute. There's somebody that's got a ringing sound coming from their side. Okay, so in terms of reward and recognition, right, when you're looking at the public sector, right, it says that within the public service that it's based on your job hierarchy, right, how the rewards are going to be awarded within that sector. So it's your job hierarchy, the different grades, because remember within the public sector, they give grades between, I think it's 1 to 12, where they look at your salary grades, where you're sitting, are you in a senior level, in the middle level, are you entry level position, where you're sitting in terms of that grading system, so that they can then determine in terms of how they're going to reward you. So it all depends which levels you're sitting. So hopefully you guys are we'll be sitting at very high grading systems and be getting the high rewards, right? So each department has to then develop the different career paths for the employees, so that it helps them in terms of trying to align, right? To say, okay, in terms of a career path, looking at where you want to go in alignment with the grading systems and the job hierarchies where you sit in, so at least employees are working to say, let me go and also be getting those different rewards that come in with different hierarchies within organizations. So it's very important, remember, when you're sitting with your employees, that you just guide them, and they also understand that as you're progressing with your career, this is what the different boxes that you'll be opening up in terms of the rewards, because remember, it also drives when you're looking at motivation and employee retention, if there is a system that also adds to the value or adds to the to motivating the employees. So you have to make sure that you then look at the department that you're in. Do they have that system? How do they look at the compensation for employees? Do they have any rewards that they offer? Or if not, is it something that maybe hasn't been done before but is actually available? So it's just about understanding in terms of the environment that you're in, what process they follow, and have they adopted it, and how efficient is it in terms of trying to drive employees, all right? So within the public sector, right, remember they look at a 12-point system, right, in terms of the different grades. So you then have to look at where you're sitting from those grading systems, where you're sitting, where do you want to sit in the future when you're looking at also your career growth. To say, okay, if I am sitting on a level, on a grade 2, right, what is the next level for me? Where do I want to be sitting, depending on what have you set for yourself, right? Because remember, some employees are driven by the growth in their careers, or driven by making sure that they get to the highest level of the hierarchy, so that they're also tapping into the different rewards that come with the jobs. So you then have to look at where do you want to sit for your personal goals, where do you want to be in terms of your career, and also as HR, also making sure that you're explaining to employees to say, this is the grading system that we're using within the public sector. this is where you're sitting, this is where you could be sitting, and this is what you should follow in terms of getting sure your career is growing as you're also developing within the different departments that you're working for, right? So the goals of the organizations, right, will help you look at what are the compensation systems that you should adopt within your organizations. So every organization will look at, these are the packages that we have, depending on what, depending on, remember when you're looking at salaries, they do an evaluation. We look at that when you talk about recruitment later on. But remember, when you're coming up with compensation packages, it also has to be in comparison with a certain skill that you're using within your sector, with the grade system, and also what's happening within that environment. If a person is an accountant, or if a person is a director of the department, what is the compensation package that you give that is relevant for that level, right? Because remember, you need to make sure that whoever you're employing in your organizations, for them to be able to be retained, they need to be getting proper compensation packages in relation to what the next person is getting, whether in an external environment where maybe you're comparing with the private sector or other departments that also have that same level. So you need to make sure that you do an analysis when you do an evaluation of the different compensation systems that you can use for your employees, so that at least one, you're retaining your employees. Because remember, the compensation that you're going to offer helps in terms of retaining your employees. People are driven by the packages that you offer, because they join sometimes organizations because of the money that you're offering and the different benefits that come with that that package. So if the package is not lucrative for your employees, this is when you then see there's a lot of employee turnover. So it's very important then to say, okay, what package should you make sure that you have, so that you're also attracting new employees? Because remember, with the changing of environments and the trends, you're trying to also attract people that come in with diverse skills, that have the right know-how of managing some of these departments, so that you can also have them within your employ. So you need to make sure that in terms of your compensation packages, how competitive are you in the market to retain those employees? And whatever you're doing has to speak to what does it say in terms of legislation when it comes to compensation packages? Because remember, when you're looking at the Public Finance Act, what does it say in terms of remuneration for employees from the different grades? Make sure that it's in alignment with that, and also make sure that from your agreements, you then pay employees according to the agreements that you put in their contracts, in their offers, whatever that you've put on those agreements has to make sure that it also speaks to the salaries that they're getting. It's moving, guys. So when you're just trying to break down in terms of what is compensation, right? It's make sure that you then look at compensation being the money. Remember, it says compensation packages being the money that an employee would expect to get from the employer for the services that they've rendered, right? Remember, because you've gotten into an agreement with an employee and you're supposed to then give them the money for the services that they're offering within that period that you've stipulated. Says it for if they've worked for the past 30 days, then you pay them whatever days they've worked within your salary cycle. Make sure that you then give them compensation for it, right? So within that compensation is then broken down through your whether you put it to your salaries plus your benefits, because remember, different departments and organizations have different packages, right? Some have additional benefits that they give their employees. So depending on the benefits that are there, make sure that you then include it in that whole compensation package that you give your employees. So some of the packages that you might give in terms of your benefits, some organizations have pension plans, some have provident funds, right, within their compensation packages. Some have medical aid, where it's maybe the employer that's paying for the full medical aid. Some it's either the employee pays half, some pay, then the organization pays the other part of the medical aid. So depending on the different benefits that you have within your departments, then you make sure that you incorporate in the compensation, because you're trying to make sure that employees also are attracted to your organization. They stay with the different departments because of the packages. Because remember, some employees stick around because one, they're getting a housing allowance, then at least they don't have to worry about paying for rent. They've got medical aid, then at least it cuts down in terms of their expenses, and they have a bigger amount in terms of the take-home salary. So depending on what you then have, and allowance in terms of what you can offer as compensation is then what you incorporate in your packages for your employees, right? We spoke about. So for some organizations, right? Or most organizations, it's very important now when you're trying to stipulate in terms of the salary packages, right? To say you pay employees in terms of the skills, the qualifications, and experience that they come with, right? In a normal environment, that's what we would expect to say. Okay, let's make sure that if a person comes in with maybe they are a doctor, right, and they've been doing this for the past 20 plus years, right, and they have the experience, this is where maybe they should be sitting in terms of a salary, right, where we making sure that we include in some fairness when it comes to those bases. But environments operate differently depending on what the policy says, and some, because of access, right, to certain people, then they're able to get salaries that are not within what they have in terms of experience. But ideally, we want to make sure that in terms of systems that we adopting in our organizations, they speak to a person's different different qualifications, the experience, the skills, so that you're also creating a platform of fairness for the employee, so that a person knows that if I'm getting into under this position with ABC, I should be sitting at this type of salary. If I'm sitting with maybe a certain type of qualification and no experience, then maybe the salary grade then is different depending on now the different allocations of experience, qualification, and skill, right? So you need to make sure that you then do an evaluation based on that, so that at least you're able to put in the different salary levels for your employees. Are we there, guys? Are we okay?
Yes,
Do
we
you
are.
have, so from your
Okay.
organizations, when you look at the compensation packages, do you feel like they're fair packages, looking at the levels of all the different levels you have in your organizations? Do they use fair systems in terms of compensation packages where it's across the board? Yes, guys. Dora, this recording will not go to your managers. Are we experiencing fair compensation systems in organizations or departments? Where's everybody? It's too sensitive.
Just repeat that, Lala, please.
I asked in terms of different organizations that you're exposed to, when you look at their compensation systems, right? Do you feel that they're fair systems where it's across the board? You know that if I'm sitting here with this qualification experience and at this level, I should be sitting at, people should be sitting at this level of a salary. It isn't about because Faye came in because she knows ABC, knows this person, then Faye is entitled to different benefits.
Personally, in my area where I work, there's people, I'm in the sales environment, and it's a very rewarding, financially rewarding environment. I mean, I've got people there, you don't need to have a degree or any form of qualification. There's two ladies that don't even have their matric, and they're earning over 100,000, you know, so I suppose hard work, dedication, not always, there's not a certain entry level of qualifications, etc., that's just in the sales environment. But then if you go to maybe a different department within my organization, you do need a certain qualification to enter into that department. So I suppose it varies from department to department as well as organization.
Now, Faye, you're going to make people stop studying and come and apply for a sales job. You said
No,
this.
no, that's not what I meant. But don't let anybody tell you you need to be super qualified to earn money. That's all that I'm saying.
Thanks, Faye, for sharing. The other guys?
From my side, Lala, I'm not happy.
Okay.
I know how I do my job or my task. And when you look at your colleagues, maybe on other departments, yeah. And somewhere I can say the color still plays a huge role. Yeah.
But do you have a platform where you can maybe air your concerns in terms of getting access to your HR department and saying this is the concern that I'm having? And because remember, when it comes to those conversations, it's you when you have it, you're supposed to go in with enough information. Say this is where I'm sitting, right? This is where I expect I should be sitting, dependent on ABC that I've done, my achievements, my besides okay, the comparison, which because they might say to you, you don't have the proof in terms of the discrimination and fairness, right? But when you then look at your experience, your inputs, your achievements within the organization, and you put it down to actually substantiate why you're requesting for that, then you can have the conversation with them to say, based on ABC and all this, I feel I should be at this certain level. But yeah.
While I was working as a help desk consultant, I tried to have a conversation with the employer, and what he asked from me, he said, "What are you going to give me if I give you like a raise?"
Okay.
So I had to do another role where I had to be part of the sales and help desk in order for me to get better salary. So to me it was not fair.
Yeah.
But then in the private sector it's not easy, because it's easier for them to let you go if you always complain. So that's the reason why I decided to equip myself and to improve my qualification in order for me to get maybe another job.
Okay.
Yeah.
They don't know you're giving within a year after you finish your qualification.
No, they don't know.
Yeah, but just try. It's about just going back and trying to say, okay, having it one last time, that conversation, because it doesn't make sense in terms of you feeling unhappy in a role, and it demotivates you really, right?
It
Yeah.
does. It
So
does.
it's better to go and have that conversation. At least I've actually gone back and spoken to them and played they don't want. Then at least then when you leave, you're like, maybe I should have, but always have those different thoughts and say, maybe I should have, I could have gotten it at the right time. But yeah, there's a chat here. Let me
Thanks.
just,
I'll try again.
yeah, try. You never know, right? Here, Elliot says, qualifications does not really guarantee a better salary in government, right? You can find yourself being managed by a grade 12. Wow. So we need to change the systems, right? So once you guys get into the administration side of the government and running the different systems, maybe you might change and try and create that fairness, Elliot. Because remember, it's all about who then is managing the process, so that at least you're trying to curb the different unfairness experiences that are happening to employees. So hopefully at some point, someone who's managing that process would have a fair practice when it comes to compensation, where it's across the board. You don't have to say, no one has to say to you, oh, what are you going to do for me? For me to be able to justify to get an increase, it has to be because of your merit and the level that you're in, you're sitting at a certain salary. But yeah, one day, hopefully. So when you're looking at putting up pay scales within your organizations, right? So you do a job evaluation, making sure that you compare different jobs and the responsibility to see how do they each contribute to the organization, how do you then put in those salaries depending on the different basis in terms of how you're going to evaluate the job. What is the hierarchy of the job? Where is it sitting in terms of its contribution to the organization, right? Because each job will have different ratings, and then you have to put in a salary depending on that evaluation. Also looking at what's happening externally to be able to determine in terms of the salaries that you're going to pay within your organization. So you then do an external analysis to look at what is going on in the market, so that you know if it's a director, what are they sitting at within that environment, private or public sector, what is a minimum salary for a director, that at least you try and put in depending on the budget that you have, right? And then, right, also look at, is it appropriate for that job? When you're putting in your salaries, you need to make sure that you see if it's a person that's coming in at a certain grade, if I'm giving them something that's beyond that grade, right? Is it appropriate for that grade or not? So you need to make sure that you do that analysis before you go and then offer someone a whole compensation package. Okay, Sizwe. Okay, thanks, Sizwe, for letting us know. All right. So in terms of putting in remuneration for employees, because remember, we put in remuneration packages for certain objective within our organizations. Can you guys see that slide? I don't know, my side, it's not showing properly. Are you able to see that attachment, guys, with the objectives of remuneration?
Yes, we can see.
Yes.
Okay. So within you coming up with remuneration packages, right? You're using it for certain reasons, right? It's a certain objective for you putting in a remuneration package for employees, where one, you want to attract employees, because employees are driven to join organizations depending on the remuneration packages that they have, right? So make sure that you're giving an attractive remuneration package, also depending on the budget. But whatever you have, if your budget doesn't allow, then you try and look at what are the additional things that can maybe add that are non-monetary to the package, so at least it attracts employees. Okay. One, to retain employees, because remember, the different packages that we have will help keep employees within our departments. So for the ones that are already within the system, we need to make sure that we keep on adjusting the packages depending on, remember, the cycles that we do increment. So every organization will do their increments, or we're looking at salaries at different intervals, but ideally every year there should be, right, a review of salaries within our departments, right, within that 12-year cycle. So you make sure that within that you're also trying to retain the ones that are already there, because they already understand the system, they know how to work the processes. So it's better to make sure that you retain those current employees. Also motivating the employees once they know that, you know what, in terms of my organization, within every set period, we're going to get a review, and that review comes in above the normal, whether it's above inflationary rate, where at least you know that within that adjustment, the employee still maintains a better take-home salary, right? So that it also drives in terms of motivating the employees, so that they're also motivated to do their work and perform better. Because remember, when it comes to remuneration, if a person feels that I'm not getting enough in terms of my experience, my qualification, they're not driven to try and perform their best. They're just doing the bare minimum, right? So just make sure that you have a system that is warrants a person's experience, their qualification, and their contribution. If they other additional benefits that you can add to employees to try and motivate them, so at least you drive them in terms of their performance, right? And then just complying with the law in terms of paying employees for the service that they're rendering to organizations, right? To say from your contracts, right, from the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, where you're supposed to show a person what's the remuneration that they're supposed to get, and also in that make sure that you include if there are any additional benefits, and also what are the deductions that are going to come off from their remuneration, so that they know at the end of the day, what am I taking home, what is the reward that I'm supposed to get from my organization for the stipulated services that I'm supposed to offer to the organization. So just make sure in terms of agreements, you then stipulate what is a person getting within the whole compensation package. What are you including? the basic salaries, the additional benefits? How do those benefits kick in? What contribution is it of that benefit that is coming from the employer or from the employee, right? How does it work? And then does that person, do you have to then, should that person leave, if it comes to in terms of different benefits, do they have to pay them back? Make sure that you stipulate in your agreements what are the different, fine print in terms of the additional benefits that you then give your employees. From your, I remember Faye mentioned some that, because she mentioned that within the sales environment, right, they're always getting bonuses. But from your experience, guys, what are some of the employee benefits have you seen or have you been exposed to? What employee benefits do you know of besides your normal salary package, right, that a person is going to get? What additional benefits do some of the departments offer?
Car allowance, petrol allowance, housing allowance.
Okay, so there's petrol allowance, housing allowance.
Cell phone allowance.
Okay, that's good.
I know sometimes you are
At
given.
least, pardon?
I'm saying I know sometimes you are given a day off or a half day if you worked an unpaid overtime. Then the following day they may say you get a half day or a day off.
Oh, okay, that's good. All right.
What about performance bonus?
Yeah, all right. Do you have that? Okay, do you also get that?
In some, I'm in a municipality.
Okay.
In some of in those positions that are referred to as contractual positions, there are performance bonus paid out. Should you exceed the expectation in terms of performance management?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are then driven by trying to achieve that bonus, because if you see some of the, some of the people in terms of just that bonus, it sets them very high, in terms of their monetary worth. So yeah, it drives their performance and also pushes them to make sure that the people that they're having in their employ are coming in to contribute towards the objective of the organization, so that they meet the bonus requirements. So it also drives. This is why sometimes if you see, right, if you see your managers pushing you, they sometimes have a motive, guys. It's a good motive for themselves, but for you also, because you're going to improve in terms of your performance. But they also know that at the end of the day, should we complete this task and reach the targets of our department, I'll be sitting with a 1 million bonus, and yeah. So it just depends with organizations, guys. So every organization would do it differently, but you can just check, guys, from it's there in your study guide. It'll give you different, a breakdown of the different benefits that employees can get and what you can also offer them, right? You have your pension plans that you organize, that your departments are paying for, right? You have your medical aid, some offer provident fund, you have, someone mentioned also that paid time off, you have other benefits, those that you guys mentioned. So depending with the organization, it helps you now to say, if you want to come up with a compensation package for your employees, what options do you have? What are you allowed within policy? What can you put in, so that it also helps you in terms of retaining employees, attracting employees, and motivating employees from the different options that you have. There's one, what's the rural? I saw one here that says, just hold on. Rural allowance and data allowance. Harry, what is that for? Is it in the education sector? I remember there's one. What is that one for?
Yeah, the rural allowance, remember, for provinces like Mpumalanga to attract employees in the health industry, doctors, imagine doctors, our advanced life support, because they are scarce skill, they are wanted the whole world. So some of these incentives like rural allowance allows us to attract some of these skills. Danger allowance refers to the emergency ambulance people when they are responding to incidents. Sometimes they are being attacked, sweared at, that they are late. Sometimes it's a violent scene where there's shooting or mob justice, things like that.
Okay.
So there's a danger allowance that cover that. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much, Harry. So remember, from the benefits, right? Most of them, they involve the organizations having to spend money from their budgets, right? But you also have different options where you can then put in benefits that don't require you having to spend money, because you're also trying to cut in terms of your budget, right? Where you can put in flexible hours. You've seen within your departments where instead of starting from your normal 8 or 9, right, you might be told, okay, you can come in at 9:30 to 5, or if you want, you can come in from 10 to 6, depending with how the organization is operating with the department. What is their service? When do their clients normally come in? They might give flexible working hours, right? Or sometimes they might say you can work from home. I don't know, guys, within the public sector, are they still employees working from home within the public sector? Or everybody has to be in the offices? Anyone from the public sector?
Yes. After COVID, there was a instruction that everybody must return to work, and there was also a program that allowed that facilitated how people must return to work. And then, but besides that, working from home, an arrangement between a manager and the employee at certain levels of the organization.
I see also someone said he's still working, Hans is still working from home. Okay, that's good. Okay, guys, so from everybody, right? With the whole working from home, once did you guys have to sign agreements in terms of this is the working from home policy that we have once COVID happened, and this is um the basis of you working from home? Because I remember when I had a conversation with a different class, um, where I think it was one of the guys was a manager, and he was saying he had phoned his employee to say, "Can you come into the office?" Right? And so let me just try and mute them. I said there's a noise that's coming from. So he had phoned one of his employees was working from home, and he had said, "No, I can't come in because I think he was in Pumalanga or something. It was a Joburg office. I can't come in. I'm in Pumalanga." But then the manager's like, "No, but I said work from home, right? Did it stipulate work from home at which address? Because work from home is an open statement, isn't it? From your work from home policies, does it stipulate in terms of this is where you should be? This is the operational agreement from working from home. How was it done in your organizations?
May I come in?
Yes, please.
Okay. In my organization, it wasn't stipulated to say when you work from home, where will you be? But now there was a case where one of the employees was requested to come and explain his report to the municipal manager, and the person uh, came, I think it was after 4 hours. Then the question was, why you coming only after 4 hours? And the response was, a person was trying to be technical to say, no, we are working from home, so, but I was not around. But then it was said that when we say you are working from home, we will not request addresses from you. Remember, when you are submitting applications, the application form was provided with your physical address. And the physical address that you have forwarded to us is the physical address that we are relying on to say, when you are working from home, we are working from the physical address that you provided to us. Because I remember the person even wanted to be remunerated for the kilometers traveled from where a person was, and that could not be accommodated. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Zita. Oh yeah, that's pushing, in terms of the boundaries from working from home. The other guys,
With us, Lala, we are allowed to be anyway, as long as you will be able to perform your daily task. And as long as you are available when they need anything from you, you need to correspond, or you need to get to the phone and respond to any queries that is needed. They said it doesn't matter as long as you can be able to perform your daily task. You can be anyway.
okay. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's nice. Unless you're not tired, you can work from anywhere. And it's with the whole tech and everybody access to internet, you literally can work from anywhere. This is where I think in terms of HR changing and the different trends, right? Where we actually don't need people to be coming into the office or sitting in an office and being there 24/7 in terms of productivity. Because when you look at it, when people are actually working from home, there are less disturbances. If you've actually seen that from I think from personal experience to say that when you're within the office space, yes, you need that interaction with people, but constantly you're getting disturbed, right? But when you're in a space where you're by yourself and no one is coming to say, oh, let's go have lunch. Oh, have you seen the latest, what's going on? People come and talk about different things when you're in the office. But people that are working from home then have that longer and undisturbed periods where they can actually concentrate. So it just depends how people then manage that whole process within the organizations, and also how do you then put in, a policy that actually talks about where does a person work from home, what are the boundaries when it comes to working from home, and what leeways do you give, right? Do you only look at productivity, or you're going to put in certain bases for people to guide in terms of working from home? Because you can actually put it as you've seen when you're applying on different portals, that they talk about, does this job offer a remote work, right? Can I work from home? Because we are now looking for that as an additional benefit. So, okay, I actually don't need to go into the office. I don't need to be spending money on fuel. I don't need to spend a budget on office clothes, right, to go into the office unless there's a meeting and you have to then put on formal clothes. But it also drives employees who want to join organizations based on those benefits that working from home comes with. Thanks everybody for sharing. From the different reward systems that you might use for your employees, right? We have what they call extrinsic and intrinsic rewards, right? Where we're trying to make sure that we driving our employees to come and perform better or beyond the expected levels that we've set within our performance agreements, right? So when you're looking at an extrinsic reward for an employee, right, this is something that you can give an employee that is tangible, that they can actually hold, right? Physically hold, that you give an employee, whether it's a trophy, it is a certificate, or it is in a monetary form. It's something that is tangible that you can give your employees. So you then look at, everything is based on policy. Whatever you're giving has to speak to what policy says when it comes to the reward system for your employees, because every department will have different reward systems depending on the nature of the work and the budget that they have and what the policy says, right? So whatever you're doing, you're trying to make sure that you recognize the employees' efforts in them, in their contribution, working towards the objective of your departments. So you make sure that you see, okay, am I going to give them, because remember, before you actually decide in terms of what reward to give an employee, you should have then tried to assess in terms of behavior and what drives that employees, because employees are driven by different things. And once you understand what this person is driven by, you're able to then to detect, to say, in terms of the reward that I'm going to offer a person, is it going to be a tangible, intangible reward? What does person prefer when it comes to the reward system that would motivate that employee? So make sure that you understand your employees from your interactions, from feedback that you get from either their managers. Then you're able to say, okay, in terms of now this certain employee, they would want maybe to get money, or this person maybe wants to get this certain benefit, or they would they looking at getting just recognition from the employee, right? So from your extrinsic rewards, you can either give them a certificate of accomplishment. I remember Tabisile mentioned that, and you've seen them sometimes in when you get into supermarkets or into department stores where you see that employee of the year is put in the store, and that also drives an employee, because trying to motivate performance of an employee, right? Their trophies, their medals, you've seen in organizations where they say employee of the year, you guys mentioned that, or they say employee for the week or best salesperson for the month, right? Sometimes they might give a badge to an employee, so that also drives them. They're walking around with a badge that shows that they've performed something or they've reached a certain target, right? Or the normal monetary reward, where you're giving employees for doing their work and reaching the expected levels beyond their compensation packages. So it just depends what the employee then prefers and what also you are allowed within your policy. Let me just, and then your intrinsic rewards. Now, this is now what comes in internally from a person, because remember, some are driven by getting something external, right? Now, with intrinsic, right, this is something that's intangible for employees, for the recognition that you're giving them, right? So you're awarding them for them reaching a certain target, reaching a certain performance level that you've set in terms of their goals, right? So you give them something that shows that they've achieved what you've set out for their goals for the organization, right? So it's intangible, it comes in now, it's driven from inside. So that person feels that motivation from internally, right? Where they're feeling that satisfaction to say, you know what, I've managed to achieve my targets, I'm happy about my achievement, I'm driven by my own behavior towards my work, right? So it has to come in from internally from that person, so they get that intrinsic reward, right? So maybe you as a person or as a manager that's heading that person, you can then give them that acknowledgement to say, you know what, thank you for doing a job right. Then they feel that sense of achievement. You're mentioning to that employee, they would take that in terms of being a form of reward. Say, my employer said, thank you for doing your job very well, or well done for achieving your targets, right? Or you're driven, right, by just your certain behaviors when it comes to doing your work. So that then is a reward for yourself that you're giving from you achieving your target. So depending on the employee, you then have to master how this person is driven, right? Do they want internal reward? Do they want intrinsic rewards? Do they want extrinsic rewards? Something that is intangible or something that's tangible, where they can actually go and say, oh, I have this trophy, I have this money that was given, or someone that feeling that they get from achieving and getting that satisfaction from performing their work and being able to contribute to the organization's objectives. What type of rewards do you guys prefer? What's your favorite reward? Guys, don't you like rewards?
Love them.
Pardon?
Love rewards.
So what type of rewards? Which ones do you like? I know you're in the sales environment, so most likely you'd want
money.
the
It's all about the money. Where I work, you don't want anything else. They give you holidays and the rest, but people want financial recognition. Unfortunately, it's how it works.
Yeah, I guess so. Everybody, yeah. I think a lot of people would looking at how the economy is operating, I think people would have a lot of people. We don't have actually stats, but from experience and interactions, people would actually prefer the monetary reward because it then covers so many things, able to do things with it, right? And either pay for certain things or just save it. So they'd rather have something that, like, this will help you in terms of getting that financial freedom. But yeah, everybody wants different things. And there's still some, I think, that are okay with getting that acknowledgement to say, oh, thank you, you've done your job well done, and you've achieved your targets. We're still going through rewards and recognition of employees. Just give me a moment. I'm just trying to go back to where we were. And the different, so we spoke about compensation, making sure that we understand in terms of what's the policies we have when it comes to compensation within organizations, understanding that we're remunerating people according to the different grading systems that we've used in the public sector, and also making sure that in terms of motivating employees and rewarding employees, what systems do we have in place that we can make sure that we motivate our employees, retain our employees, and also attract new employees depending on the different compensation packages that we can offer for those purposes. So I'm just going to look at role of rewards within the organization, right? To say, why do we actually need to have rewards within our organizations? To say that, one, it gives you a competitive advantage with your other departments, other organizations, because remember, employees will compare in terms of what each organization is offering when it comes to a certain qualification or a certain position. And within that, if you have then a reward system, it then gives you that competitive advantage to say, when employees are then looking, say, okay, if this company offers a basic pay only, on top of that, do they have a reward system within their policy that they offer, so that it also attracts new employees, right? One, it also helps in terms of rewards aim at being strategic by designing ways to compensate employees, right, for their efforts. So remember when we spoke about rewards, to say they'll come in to say we're trying to acknowledge employees for the additional effort that they've done to actually meet their targets, their goals that we've set, or the different objectives that we're working on in our organizations, right, depending on the performance that they're showing. So that also helps in terms of having that in the system to drive employees to perform better. Further, I can also say that it adds value, right, to employees once they see that the organizations are actually giving them something beyond the normal basic pay. So you actually value my service, you value my contribution. So that also acts as a trigger to motivate your employees, and it validates that they feel important and feel respected, that you actually give me that acknowledgement when it comes to my service to your employees, right? We spoke about performance, so very, very good also reiterate in terms of our organizations, if we have a system in place when it comes to rewarding them for performance, to say that we also explain to the employees within the contract to say that within this organization there is a policy that sits that if you perform at certain levels, like the different bonuses that you guys are talking about, to say you will be able to attain the certain bonuses sitting at these levels or sitting at these certain goals that you're given, depending with the environment that you're working in. So every environment will have different reward systems and will be used to drive employees at the end of the day to work towards meeting the objectives of the organizations. Because all you're trying to do as HR, as a person that's working with people, is to make sure that the people that you have within your management are driven, are motivated to perform towards the goals of your organization. Whatever you've set in as your objectives for your departments, they are working in alignment with that their goals speak into that, their performance is working towards achieving those objectives. So within your different spheres, then when you add this element of rewards and recognition, then it's able to also help you in catapulting, right, the employees to get to the expectations of the organization. So very important that when you join organizations, or even in the organizations that you're in, to go back and say, okay, do we have actually a policy when it comes to compensation, and do we have a reward system? What benefits do we have that we can give employees from the rewards? What is available? Do we have anything extrinsic that we can offer employees, depending on also on the employees? But from your interaction with the employees, then you would have be able to detect to say what actually would be a better reward system that you can adopt for your employees. So when organizations also introduce rewards within their systems, right? They have certain objectives that they're trying to make sure that they achieve when they put in these systems within their processes, right? One, to reinforce positive performance from your employees or positive behavior from your employees. Because remember, employees are driven by certain things, and if you want them to continuously perform in a certain way, right, where you want to reinforce that behavior, that good behavior, then you have to trigger it with a certain element where now those reward systems can come in and be able to keep that positive behavior coming in from your employees, right? One, to make sure that it helps you in retaining best talent within your organizations, because already when you're looking at scarce skills and the migration of employees and brain drain, to say that you might want to retain some of these employees that are hard to acquire. So within you having certain rewards and recognition programs that might also help you in keeping an employee within your organizations, because employees are always looking for various ways or different compensation packages within organizations. But once you're able to speak to their needs and their expectations, and it helps you in terms of retaining those employees. So very important to understand from your the different employees that you have, when you're doing your succession planning, to see, okay, which are the critical roles that you have within your organizations? How do we make sure that we retain these employees from the other ones that we have that are also important? Because remember, everybody is important, but some are harder to replace. Within those ones, what's the best way we can put in a policy when it comes to rewarding them, so that at least it keeps them within our systems? And also looking at how best do we attract new talent into our organizations. So once we have that within our organizations, it's easier for people to apply. Say, I want to join that organization because I like them. They have very good, or their reward systems are the best compared to all the other organizations in the same arena. So employees would be also attracted to come and to want to join your organizations once they see your reward and recognition programs. Because remember, when you're having interviews or interviewing candidates, normally they would ask you in terms of your packages, what does it entail? What do you offer as an organization? Do you have additional rewards that come in place? And what's the culture when it comes to recognition? Employees will ask that during interviews, or you can also mention it when you're doing your recruitment and selection, so that at least it gives people an idea in terms of what compensation packages that they can actually expect from your organization. So that's basically, guys, in terms of the rewards and recognition for employees, that you should remember. Why do we actually have to put reward systems? What is the basis of having a compensation policy within our departments? What are the different options that we have when it comes to rewarding employees? What is the basis? How are we going to evaluate our salary grades for our employees? How do we make sure that we equate qualification and skills to different positions? And how do we make sure that we are awarding people for their specific contributions to the organization? So you need to have a basis in terms of how you're going to validate that and evaluate for every employee, so that you have a fair system that you're following within your organizations. We're going to move on to the next. So that is in a nutshell the first section when it comes to rewards and recognition that you excuse me, guys, that we looked at. So just make sure on your own, also look at your organizations, guys, to say, from my own organization, how is it done in terms of rewards and recognition, in terms of compensation packages? What do we have? What policy do we have when it comes to compensation for organization? And just see if there is actually any one. From your contracts, does it speak of one reviews on a yearly basis? Has it been constant? Has it been happening? If not, then those are things that you would want to raise with the employer and see in terms of the basic policy. Does it actually allow it or not? What is the basis, if it's not happening? And also, depending on the reward systems with your teams, if you're managing teams and speaking and interacting with your teams, you're able to pick up in terms of how best you can reward your employees, what benefits you have access to that you can actually offer your employees so that you're getting the best performance from them. Because remember, whatever you're doing, whoever you're hiring, you need to make sure that they're speaking to you, meeting the objectives of the teams that you're running. So you have to make sure that you try and equip them with what they expect, what they need for them to be comfortable, for them to be motivated, for them to want to stay within your departments. Our next section, guys, is on equity, which is your section 7.59, right? Equity, where we're looking at employment equity and affirmative action goals, right, within organizations, looking at our Employment Equity Act, right, that comes in the legislation that also helps us manage our human resource element in organizations. So it's very important when actually working in the public sector so that we make sure we incorporate employment equity, because remember, since working in public sector, we're trying to represent the objectives of the government as a whole, and we're trying to also make sure that private sector also incorporates all these different objectives that we want to attain when it comes to equity. So it's only fitting that as the people that are actually setting up the legislation that comes for the whole nation, that we also try and emulate the expectations of that of the different legislation that governs employment, right? So when you're looking at employment equity, right, it's based on two things, right? Where it looks at removing, right, unfair discrimination within the workplace. Where there was discrimination before, yes, it's still there, right? But ideally, we're trying to remove it within the workspace, right? Whether it's on the basis of hiring a person or promotion or training, right? Where you want to give people fair chances or fair labor practices within our organizations, either based on pay or benefits. It needs to be on a fair basis. So we're trying to move that discrimination, right? And also encourage employers, right, to undertake organizational transformation within the organizations, where we're saying, can you try and incorporate the previously disadvantaged groups into your system so that there's some form of equality in trying to get them into the system, right? Where before we couldn't, there wasn't a fair system that was happening before we got independence, but post independence, we're trying to make sure that as a unit, as a public sector, that we try and make sure that from the different designated groups, we try and employ them. We make sure that they're accounted for within our different structures in our organization. So it's very important when you're looking at equity, as you're sitting and trying to understand as an HR person, to say, okay, in terms of this policy, how do we make sure that we're accommodated for our organization? How do we make sure that we move away from discrimination? If there is discrimination, what is the policy when it comes to addressing discrimination within organization? Especially when you're looking at recruitment and selection, which we will discuss later, to say when you're doing those processes, how to make sure in terms of how you address employees, or even just your wording in your advert does not show any form of discrimination. So it's very important that when you're looking now at equity, you're giving everybody a fair chance when it comes to access to the different systems or processes that you have, or benefits in your organization, so that you're speaking to expectations of legislation. Do you guys have views? Do your organizations follow, expectations of equity? Are they strict on it to try and create that balance, or it hasn't yet been formally or properly incorporated in how organizations either do their promotions or recruitment for employees? From your guys' companies, guys, or from your experience? Okay, all right, Faye. From the other guys, from your organizations, do they follow what the Employment Equity Act expects from organizations? Okay, I see. Hi, Nolo. Today you've been very quiet. Thanks for that contribution. He says in his organization, they do follow it, which is a good thing, right? Try create that balance, but in trying to follow that, remember, we'll see as we're going on, as we're going further to say, as we're employing people, we need to make sure that we're putting in people from the different designated groups that actually fit into those roles. We're not just hiring people on the basis of, yes, you fall under this certain designated group, so I should just hire you, whether you don't have the merit for that job. So it's very important that as we're hiring people with, the right qualifications, the right skills into those roles, as long as they're coming from the various designated groups, and we're not just giving people on the basis of just hiring a person because it says we should get a person within this designated group. So just make sure from your hiring processes, you're also hiring people that actually would be able to contribute to the objectives of your organizations, right? So from the legislation side, right, when it looks at equity, you should make sure that you look at your Employment Equity Act. What does it say in terms of bringing in fairness within your labor practices, right? How do you make sure that you give equal chances or fair chances to every group, on the basis of no discrimination, right? And then also look at what are the different amendments that have come up when it comes to the Employment Equity Act. What have they changed in that, right? So you see just check from page 58, right? What have they changed when it comes to employment equity? I want you guys to then just read on your own to see the different amendments from the set where it was set in 1998. What changes have they made so that you're keeping abreast? Because remember, with legislation, it's always important that you always going back, because they're always adjusting and making amendments to the different acts. So as a person that's an employee or a person that's working with HR, it's always important that you take note of what are the different changes that they put in place, so that you're also able to incorporate them in your company's policies or how you run the organizations, right? So from that Employment Equity Act, what its main aim was to make sure that in terms of organizations, right? Remember, we are a rainbow nation, right? So from the different people that are in organizations, it needs to be a true reflection of the population of South Africa, to say from the different designated groups that we have within our nation, are they all within the working system? Are we able to accommodate them in our working system, or is it just we're only hiring on one group, right? So it needs to make sure that we need to make sure as employers, as people that are managing the whole process of getting people into our organizations, we have fair representation of all the different designated groups in our workplaces, right? And also make sure we look at addressing discrimination, because discrimination is a very big issue that we still need to make sure that we sort out within our workplaces. So within our policies, we need to make sure that we have a policy that speaks to discrimination and what's the process, what happens if a person discriminates on any of the bases, what is the repercussion, what happen if a person feels they're being unfairly treated on basis of the different issues, whether it's because of gender, because of qualification. You make sure you stipulate within your policy how a person, if they feel that they've been discriminated, what's the process that they can follow. Because you still see that it's still eminent in some organization, it's still there from people's interactions, it's still there, but we have to try and change, how we're managing organizations, so that at least we're giving equal opportunities to the different groups, and also trying to work on eradicating when it comes to poverty, looking at those strategic goals of public sector. We working on poverty, unemployment, making sure that everybody from those different groups is represented in our workforce. Any questions so far, guys? Are we all on the same page?
Yes, we are.
Okay, you guys are too quiet. I don't like it when you guys are too quiet. I want to hear your voices at some point. Yeah, right. So what do you think, what is the purpose, right, of having equity in an organization, in organizations? What do you think is the purpose? Anyone?
Equal opportunities to all.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Anything else, guys?
To prevent discrimination and unfair treatment based on our differences.
Okay.
I mean, based on how different we are in terms of culture, age, and others.
Okay, fair treatment. What else?
And then
One last.
also,
Pardon?
also to ensure that the previously disadvantaged are taken care of in terms of opportunities.
Okay.
Suitably so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. So very important, right? That when we're looking at organizations to say, are we actually incorporating those different, the purpose of having employment equity, right? Within our organizations, do we have fair labor practices? Are we trying to redress in terms of the different designated groups that weren't represented within the workforce? How best to make sure that we incorporate everybody into our system and we represent, our population as being the Rainbow Nation. So we have to look within our organizations, what is being done? How do we correct, right? Going forward, do we actually have policies in place? Because it all comes down to what does our policy say when it comes to hiring, right? Does it accommodate? Do we actually have? Remember when you speak about previously disadvantaged groups, especially when you're looking at disability within our workspaces, does it actually accommodate, us being able to get someone into our employment that is from that certain destination groups? So it's very important as we're now working towards that transformation in organizations to say that do we actually have the right resources, right infrastructure to accommodate, people from those different groups. So very important that you manage that process, you bring in policy. If it's not there, correct it. How best you correct it, address if there are situations where it isn't being incorporated or people are getting discriminated. At least you're trying to create some form of fairness. Because remember, when you're then looking at that retention, because everything has a report effect or is aligned to the next, to say in terms of the policies that we have and how we then treat our employees, right? It then speaks to one, their performance, it speaks to motivating them to do their work, it speaks to retention and attracting new employees into our department. So trying to make sure that we actually correct those different areas that are of concern to a nation, then it also helps to speak to the other areas of HR that will affect meeting the objectives of the organization. So within Employment Equity Act, right, you see that they would use certain terms that we just need to make sure that we take note of, right? Where it speaks of affirmative action, right, to say, okay, what is affirmative action, right? It looks at one, ensuring that qualified people, because remember I said to you, when we trying to incorporate people from those specific designated groups, right, we need to make sure that these people are coming in on the basis of merit, right? We're not hiring to say that I'm just speaking to this group, but in terms of them not having the qualification, they don't fit, right? So making sure that people from these designated groups have equal opportunities in the workplace and they're actually qualified, right? So the qualified people from designated groups that are coming into the workplace and given equal opportunities, okay? And then designated groups, these are the different breakdown of, how do we say, of how the government selected to say from these different areas of our population, right? This is where now we want to target in terms of correcting the disadvantaged people from the previous areas, right? Where they broke it down to one, Africans, to colored, to Indians, to women, to disabled people, right? To say these are the designated groups that we need to incorporate in our equity, into our equity plan in terms of getting them in our workforce, right? So whenever they mention designated group, you then look at what are those areas or people that were disadvantaged previously, and you break it down to which are these different areas that you should look at within your organizations. And then designated employers. Now, these are the employers that must comply, right, with the act of getting making sure that they speak to the equity plan. So if you hire more than 50 people, right, you're part of the designated employer. Anyone that hires more than 50 people should make sure that in terms of equity, they're speaking to expectations of the government when it comes to issues of equity. And then also looks at your annual turnover, right? In terms of Schedule 4 of the Employment Equity Act. So it breaks down, say, if you're getting a certain turnover, I can't remember how much it was. It was 1.2 or is it 2 million? I can't remember. But when you look at Schedule 4, it will break down in terms of if you're getting a turnover in your business, right, that is above this amount you expected now, to also make sure that you look at having an equity plan, making sure that you accommodate in terms of getting the different designated groups within your organizations, right? And any municipality or organ of state has to then is a designated employer. So anyone that speaks into those different areas has to make sure that they accommodate when it comes to equity. They must also submit their equity plans. You will see that the different forms, if you're managing the HR process, that you're supposed to submit to Department of Labor, which is the forms you see when we discuss later. Similarly in EEA 2 and EEA 4, I think, Employment Equity Act, Form 2 and Form 2, I can't remember. But you're supposed to submit at certain intervals within your financial period your equity plan to Department of Labor to show this is what your organization is done in terms of trying to incorporate all the different designated groups in your workforce. So very important for you to understand which are these different groups, and then how do I make sure that am I a designated employer? If I'm hiring a few people, then I'm not supposed to then submit it or not, or should I submit it? What's the turnover that says I'm a designated employer or not? So you then have to go and look at what that schedule says in terms of turnover, because sometimes then it's updated looking at the changes with organizations. Yes, Lehlongonalo?
Hi, Lehlongonalo here. What are the different thresholds?
Pardon?
What are the different thresholds in terms of submissions, number of employees, organizations, so the size of organizations that ought to submit?
So it says as long as you have 50 employees and more, you need to submit.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So from there, you then fill in terms of different designations, and it will ask you then from the form you'll see once you're filling in. So that's normally done depending with how your HR does it. If you're in that HR, you'll see the forms where you have to then break down from the different designation groups, who's sitting in what level, how many do you have in terms of women, breaking it down in terms of who's Black, who's colored, who's white, right? Have you hired? How many are sitting in terms of management, who's sitting at what level? It breaks it down into different areas that you're supposed to fill in and see, okay, to actually speak to those different designated areas within your workforce. But yeah, it's a complicated, it's an interesting form when you see it, but you can always see, maybe you can ask your HR if they have it, or just on the internet, you see that it's sometimes it's there, the form is there, right? The different forms are there that you can look at and see what are actually the requirements in terms of now employee component, or how you then break it down for your employees to say, okay, let me now break down to see this is how I've managed to accommodate the different areas. It also talks about being suitably qualified, right, for you getting employed into different organizations, right? So Employment Act says, it tries to say to employers, right, that you need to make sure that in terms of you hiring, you should get advanced people from the different disadvantaged groups, right, in terms of being suitably qualified. So whoever is coming in when you're hiring have to be qualified for that position. Like what I mentioned before, it's based on merit, but we're trying to target the disadvantaged areas of our population, right? So when you're now breaking down in terms of what is suitably qualified, you're basing it on your qualifications, on the prior learning, right? If they went through prior learning from experience and exposure, right? And then their capacity, or potential to acquire within a reasonable time the ability to do the job. So you're supposed to say within a stipulated time, whether it's a year, 6 months, will that person be able to do that job? Do they have adequate time within a certain space of time that they can be trained or mentored to actually get to the level that you need for them to go and do that job? Will they be able to perform that job? So you can look at now that person to say, okay, if I'm hiring a person from this designated group, right? If I say within 6 months, someone is able to keep them, or they're able to get a qualification and do the job effectively and efficiently, then I can be able to say, let me hire this person because then they show that potential, right, to be able to obtain the requirements of the job. So it also just depends from when you're hiring, what is the basis that you're going to say, I'm hiring this space on this space, on this qualification. How do they qualify to actually be hired within your organization? So you base it on those different areas. So at least when you're justifying, because whatever you're doing, you have to justify it, right? When you're doing audits or for compliance purposes. To say, if you're asked to say, why did you hire this person, you can then go back in terms of their profile, in terms of their file, to say, okay, they have this qualification, or I saw that they had this, there was room for them to be able to acquire, right, the qualification within that space and be able to then work on this, because maybe the person that was there had served notice or say they're going to leave after a couple of months. So there was enough time to train them for the person to get a qualification and be able to perform the job at a later date. So always make sure that you look at the person being suitably qualified, right? It has to be based on merit. Though it sometimes doesn't happen. People will get into the system based on unfair labor practices, but ideally, we're trying to make sure that if we are trying to correct the different errors, let's also make sure that whoever we're getting into the system actually can contribute to the success of our divisions, to meeting the goals of our organizations, because we're just not trying to put in numbers and say, yes, tick, we've actually spoken to the needs of employment equity. Are we actually getting people that, one, are equipped to actually come and do the jobs and also would be able to benefit the organizations and also grow on for themselves? Because we're also looking at their personal growth. Today, they're actually acquiring the specific skills, the qualifications to fulfill these roles. It also looks at employment of disabled people, right? So remember, we have to, from the different designated groups, actually with the ones I would need us to then adjust in terms of infrastructure, we need to make sure that, one, we do not discriminate and also accommodate them in our work spaces, right? So in terms of our hiring practices, you're not allowed, right, to discriminate on the basis of disability. So you need to make sure that within your organizations, do you have one set lavatories that would accommodate anyone who's disabled? Do you have ramps in terms of how if someone is using a wheelchair or is using what's this, I think it's a walking stick, or is unable to use the stairs? Do you have any access to the building that you've put in place that a person can use when it comes to being comfortable within the workspace? You need to make sure that you support your the employees from these different designated groups to make sure that you incorporate them in your environment. Because normally you'd find that some organizations don't have, because you'll see nowadays that they put in different bathrooms, they even put in parkings, right, to say, okay, let's make sure that we accommodate for everybody from the different who are disabled. So make sure that in your organization, as you're trying to implement equity and give fair chances to all employees and all designated or discriminated employees, you're putting in place infrastructure to help you support those employees. Because doesn't make sense that, yes, you'd hire a person, but it comes to now their safety, right? Looking at your Basic Conditions of Employment Act, say, do they actually have a conducive work environment? Do they feel safe in terms of how they can maneuver within your workspace? So make sure that you then incorporate this and you adjust your workspaces so that at least by the time you're hiring people that would need additional services within your workspace, you've put in safe and comfortable work structures for them and systems that can accommodate their free induction into your organizations. And remember, wherever you're hiring, same basis, right, to say from the different groups, based on your qualifications, on your suitably qualified, do they have the qualifications? Do they have the potential to acquire the qualifications, right? So for everyone, right, it needs to be fair across the board. So at least you're not saying, okay, I've given this job to this person because, one, they're disabled, but I haven't actually looked at, are they suitable for the job, right? You need to make sure that when you're giving, you're not discriminating on that basis, but saying, But when it comes to the job, are you able to perform the job so that everybody who's getting into that job is able to perform the requirements of the job? Also, you're supposed to make sure that you understand when it comes to one, because remember from Employment Equity Act, it also talks about how we doing recruitment in terms of asking employees when it comes to medical testing, right? To say, what does it say when it comes to Employment Equity Act? Because it then guides us, right? To say from our hiring process, then we're not allowed, right, to actually ask a person and say, can you do an HIV test, right? Unless the job, right, and you've gotten a letter from a labor court to say, okay, because of the job and what it entails, then this role, it requires a person to have this test done, because according to law, you're then not allowed to just say, can you please do a test for me? Can you please give me your medical report, or can you, let me know in terms of your health, what is the different things that you're facing. So you're supposed to make sure that you follow the proper process should you want to get any test done by an employee, because remember, what does the law say? Whatever we're doing has to speak to what the law says, so that we're not sitting in situations where employees would say, or open a case in terms of discrimination, or infringing in terms of their rights. So as a person that's doing that function, you need to make sure that you understand in terms of what you're asking for, what is the justification that you've gotten for that, what does the law say, what policy have you put in place to make sure that you protect, right, your employees and the organization. Because whatever you're doing, you need to make sure that you're trying to save the relationship, and also make sure that you're not bringing any grievances from either party, right? From the employer, from the employer, in terms of how you're managing that process and incorporating, equity within your organizations. Same applies with you doing a psychometrical test. What does it say within legislation? Is it allowed? What is the basis of you actually performing those tests, right? Have you managed to show your employees that it's valid for this reason for you to get into this job? This is what the job requires. What is the basis? You need to give the basis and supporting, legal letter to say this is what this is going to speak into when it comes to the organization, and this is how you've managed to accommodate what the legislation says. Because once you miss out the requirements of the legislation, then you're opening up room for cases and issues that would then affect, the reputation of your organization. It's very important that as you're managing that process, you're incorporating the requirements of the legislation, so that you're not leaving any loopholes. You're not exposing the organizations to any lawsuits, right? You need to protect the organization, right? The same when you're trying to also protect the employee, but also make sure that from the onset you've put in policies, you've spoken to your departments to say this is what the legislation says, this is the expectations of legislation, this is what we need is allowed within expectations of the legislation, so that at least you're not infringing in terms of what the law says. So from your side, guys, in a nutshell, right, what are the two objectives of your Employment Equity Act, if you were to, from what we've discussed, if you still remember from our conversations, what then are the objectives of the Employment Equity Act? Anyone? We spoke about this. I just want to see if you guys were listening. What are the objectives of the Employment Equity Act? Where are you guys? It's only, what time is it? It's only 11, guys. What are the objectives of Employment Equity Act? We spoke about them, and I can't remember if it was Harry and one of you guys mentioned them. Come on, guys. What do you recall from the objectives? What are the important, okay, why do we have the Employment Equity Act? What is it trying to achieve? It was mentioned in the conversations you've been having. So remember when, okay, so normally when, let's say you put in a situation where, yes, you haven't gotten access to the theory, but a person then asks you in terms of the legislation and looking at what, just reading from what the legislation is when it speaks about equity, right? Already it would be able to guide you to say, okay, this is what I think it's trying to speaks to in terms of its objective, right? When you talk about equity, it means maybe there was an area of unfairness that happened, right? So now we're trying to make sure that we correct that unfairness and to remove that discrimination. Because remember, when you're talking about equity, you're trying to give equal opportunity to everybody, right? So from, yes, Hans, okay, ensures all employees receive equal. So let me just read the chat. Yes, ensure all employees receives equal opportunities. Yes. So removing the element of discrimination within our organizations, and also implementing affirmative action, guys. Remember, I spoke about affirmative action earlier on, right? To make sure that from the different designated groups that we've been selected, how do we incorporate them within our workspaces, right? What are those designated groups that we should make sure we account for within our organizations? So when you're looking at Employment Equity Act, make sure you understand its objectives, right? What does it want to achieve, and then how do you then accommodate it within your organizations? It's very important. Once you understand what the law expects from us, right? Then you're able to create policies that speak to that and also advise organizations, all your departments, to say this is what we should be doing when it comes to our hiring process, or in terms of our policies within our organizations, or just our infrastructure, so that we're speaking to the expectations of our Employment Equity Act. You see, when I'm just updating here, guys, right, that there are levels. Hold on, it's just opening. I don't know, it's a bit slow. I'm trying to open the next to see that as you see, as people look at their equity plans, right? To see when you're hiring or making people, that you allocate people in these different roles, right? You need to make sure that you're breaking down from the different levels and understanding what are the levels we have within organizations. Because when you're filling in your forms for your equity plans, right? You need to make sure you show it now to say from your elementary to top management, how you're breaking down in terms of who's sitting where from these different designated groups that have been given, right? When looking at affirmative action, who's sitting in terms of a senior manager, who is a middle manager from the different designated groups. You need to understand how are these different occupational categories within the workspace. How do you make sure that you put in people from the different disadvantaged groups into the different levels, so that you speak into each level and speak into each disadvantaged group, so that when you're doing your submissions, or even just your hiring, if you're following it to the T, to say, okay, let me actually make sure that everybody from the different groups is represented within my organization. Let me break it down within these different levels. You understand what the levels are and where to put in the people, and you break it down and follow that process. It then makes it easier that you understand where are they supposed to be sitting, what are the levels that we have within the hierarchy of government, and how do I make sure that everybody is then accommodated for within the different levels. So here is a question for you guys, right? To say within your organizations, what programs have they put in, right, in terms of complying with our Employment Equity Act? Have you seen any programs, any policies within your organizations that are trying to speak to the Employment Equity Act? From your organizations, guys. Yes, Lovers, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Lala. Well, speaking for myself, we are definitely government, and we are governed by labor laws, which clearly stipulates that there has to be definitely fair treatment in terms of employment equity. We are equally forced or allowed to craft our policies to be able to be accommodative of such. And we also have plans in place to make sure that we balance issues of gender, issues of disability, and all of those. So it's a requirement that government is expected to fulfill, as informed by the acts and all the regulations that government uses or is as. Yes, if I may put it like that, yeah. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Lapis. But from the having to do it, is it actually being done? Do you think it's from your experience? Is it actually happening, or it's a policy that's sitting and filed away?
No, it's something that we see happening every day in the institution. We see the gender numbers, the female numbers going up in terms of gender. We are looking every now and then. Disabled people or people with disabilities are coming into the institution, and we make even the necessary provisions for them. I know we have a lawyer that we recently hired who is blind. We had to go as far as buying brailles machines and interpretation machines and all sorts of equipment to be able to make them allow them to execute their duties. So we are stretching the boundaries. We are doing quite well, if I may say.
Oh, okay, thank you so much, Labas. It's quite good to hear that it's also happening within the public sector. It's just not being enforced or being forced to happen in the private sector, but the people that actually have come up with these regulations are actually following and incorporating them in their systems. The other guys from your organizations, yes, Gladys.
In my organization, we also having a equity committee that is sitting during the recruitment processes and overseeing all the processes that is followed as per the equity plan.
Which is quite good. Because at least you're taking it away from just sitting with HR in terms of that recruitment and saying, let's have a group that comes in and actually represents and is not biased in terms of the process, and when it only looks at making sure the organization incorporates that, which is quite good. Thank you guys for sharing that. So just for, from everyone's side, just go and see within your organizations within their policies, or just when you're looking around in terms of the buildings, have they actually tried to accommodate when it comes to, changing the infrastructure to incorporate people with disabilities within your workforce? What is, when you're looking at the ratios, what are the numbers like? Is there like representation of the whole population of South Africa? Just go and analyze and see organizations, how they're doing it. And also from the different adverts, or when during their hiring, do they actually try and speak to affirmative action or not? How are they doing the hiring processes? Or is it just hiring in terms of whoever we get, with actually following trying to incorporate the different disadvantaged groups? So you can just do it on your own to see what organizations are doing from their side. Any questions, guys, before we move on to the next? Just make sure you read on and get the full context of Employment Equity Act and the amendments that have happened in terms of Employment Equity Act. What are they? What should you be aware of? And just take a note of them. there are no more questions. If there are no questions, we're just going to move on to components of the employment equity plan, right? To say what do you find in there, so that you're also aware of the different areas that you should accommodate when it comes to your equity plan, right? Can you guys see this? Don't know why on mine. Sorry, guys. Is this visible, right? Are you guys able to see this? Objectives of our
Yes.
employment equity plan.
Yeah, we can see.
Yes, we can see.
Okay. So just make sure as you're compiling your equity plan, right, to see that one, does it speak about, the affirmative measures that you want to put in place, right? Within your organizations, as you speak to that, because trying to make sure that you bring in equity within your organizations. Have you put in a time frame in terms of when you need to make sure that these people are within your employment, right? You need to put in time frames. Remember, whatever you're doing, you want to implement within organizations, you need to put in certain criteria to say that this is when it needs to be done. This is what we're looking for in terms of affirmative affirmative measures. Would want to hire from the different designated groups. So it also speaks to the needs of the organization and expectations of expectations of equity, right? And if you have, like what Gladys has said, some organizations will have an equity committee, right? Which is fine, but sometimes that responsibility sits with HR, where they're supposed to understand in terms of equity, how do we make sure we incorporate that in our organization. So depending on how it's done with the different organizations, you need to make sure that you actually have people that understand the need for it and are actually incorporating it in how the business is run, right? And then one, achievement of specific goals. So from your equity plan, you set in your goals to say, okay, by a certain period, we should have hired ABC, right, from your designated groups, right? So put in your goals, put in your targets, say, these are the targets that we're working towards of hiring, whether it's 15 Black women, 15 African women, 15 African women, is it 20 disabled people? Is it 40 Indians? Is it, break down in terms of what are the goals and targets that you want to meet, so that at least you're working towards a certain number. Because remember, you can't blindly say, okay, yes, we want to incorporate these different disadvantaged groups, but in terms of how do you say you've achieved your target, so always make sure that within your equity plan, you've put in those specific targets for your organization, right? And also make sure that one, you put in awareness in terms of equity in your organizations, where you're also training your employees and developing them, right? So that they understand in terms of how do we, the issue of equity, how do we incorporate this into our organizations, and also making sure that in terms of training, you're also training everybody from the different designated groups. It's very important that that is done within your organizations, okay? And then from everything, remember, once you've set out your plan, always go back and analyze to see, okay, in terms of the different goals that we've set, we actually achieve that within the specific period we put in between, to say, okay, this is what our target was, and this is the duration we put in for us achieving those different goals, right? Let's now go back and see, do we actually achieve that? If we didn't, what was the issue that we face in terms of getting those different areas? What is it based on? They didn't have the qualifications, or we didn't get access to, or we didn't have the budget? What happened in terms of the organization not meeting those goals? It's very important that once everybody understands the need, right, for this correction when it comes to equity, right, and they enforce it within their policies, then it's easier now to speak to the requirements of legislation in our organizations to say, how do we also accommodate the different disadvantaged groups with our organizations. So this is just some of the objectives in terms of having employment equity plan within our organizations. So just when you're looking at, if you are part of that process, if you maybe get to do, equity plans for your organizations, then just try and make sure that you remember in terms of what are the targets we're working for, what are the different destination groups that we want to accommodate for, and we put in infrastructure to accommodate the designated group that we want to get into the organization, and then what are the timelines in terms of actually getting the people within our systems, then it's very important that you follow a process in getting these people into your system and getting them to fully be able to work towards objectives of your organizations. Because whatever you're doing in also getting these employees into your workforce, right, is to make sure that they're also contributing to your overall objectives of your organizations. Let me just check the time, guys. Our time is 11:25. So I'm just going to give you guys an exercise. You know, I think by now you're tired of hearing my voice. I want to hear somebody else's voice. I'm going to give you guys an exercise, right? Because I know when you guys behind the scenes and discussing, this is where you bring out most of your ideas and the knowledge that you have. So I'm going to give you an exercise just for the next 30 minutes. It's 11:25, right? It will take us about 5 minutes to get into those groups, right? I want you guys to prepare a mini presentation, right? I'll give you access depending on who you're going to nominate from your groups. Please don't, in your groups, make sure you discuss and come back with something for the platform, and please don't disappear. We just one-to-one train ourselves in terms of coming up with a presentation. Should you be in a situation in your different environments where you're asked to prepare a presentation for your different roles, right? So prepare a mini presentation that you can share with the class, right? To outline and discuss the components of an employment equity plan. What are the different elements that are there within an employment equity plan, right? They're there, you find them within your learner guide, but I want you now to try and give us and present them to your classmates to say, this is what it says, and this is just give a discussion on it. So if you can do, are you guys fine with that exercise where you're going to come up with a presentation, just a mini presentation, guys? It just depends how what information you want to put, how you're going to put it in, but just make sure you have your main points, right, in terms of what you're going to discuss, and then just close off to say in terms of a summary. It's just a summary of what your presentation was about. So you just follow a certain structure, but just go to what that equity plan has within its elements and just break down and explain those. Any questions on that, guys? Any questions, guys, before I...
Nola, it's not a question.
Yes.
Can you please check how many people are available to participate in groups?
So
Because
we're
for
21
the past
people.
for the past 2 days, there were groups that didn't manage to present. Apologies for not participating yesterday. I was in a meeting, and then it just become quiet when you said maybe group 1. Please present what you tell us what you discuss. Or sometimes you put us in a group and then you find yourself that in that group maybe there is 1 or 2 people that are participating. I don't know.
So you guys are currently 23 of you guys, right? Because let's say 20, I don't know if it includes us. No, it's 23 people within the class. So I'll put you guys maybe in 3 groups. So at least even if there's a drop off, you might have 3 or 4 people that would be discussing. But ideally, we're trying to just get in a habit where we're comfortable enough to share our ideas. Guys, there's a correct answer, but within us giving wrong answers, we're also learning in that process. We're also getting comfortable in terms of speaking in an open platform and sharing our ideas. Because remember, it's just not from the learner guide and the information that you would get from your facilitator that will help you in terms of understanding the concept. It's from your interactions with people that are actually experiencing all the different concepts and the management of HR, that you get that, more knowledge and an understanding of what, that study is about. So just, get comfortable, share ideas, even if you're giving 2 points, guys. It's not everybody, yes, would want to share the ideas, but just try and contribute and say, for my learning, journey, this is my contribution towards this. And, it's just it's not a serious exercise like you getting rated. It's just creating a platform where people get comfortable, and do this. By the time you get into your offices, when you get into your roles, because remember, you guys are all speaking about, oh, yes, we want to progress in terms of our careers. Some of your positions might come with requirements of you need to prepare a presentation, you need to go speak in an open platform, you've moved away from behind the scenes. So once you're learning this slowly and doing it, in this environment, which is, unrated, then by the time you get into your positions there, when you become directors and at the grade 12s of, of the hierarchies, you're comfortable and have done the groundwork. So please, there's no rating in this. It's just trying to share ideas. So I'll put you guys in 3 groups, right? So that at least there are enough numbers. And if you can, please just make sure you share in the group. Don't go mute and disappear. Please do not disappear. I remember when I was once put in a group when we're doing an exercise, and I ended up doing the presentation on my own because everybody else just pretended they're not there and muted for some reason, So let's not do that. Just find something that you're going to contribute to your group at the end of the day. Okay? So I'm going to put you guys in groups from now till, for the next 30 minutes. Let me just see, hold on. Okay, let me put the groups. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the icon. So I'm going to put you in the group. So just look at what are the components of a employment equity plan. Before I actually do this, let me just do this. Make sure you nominate. Let me see, guys. Okay, I can make a presenter. So from your groups, before I put you in, just make sure you nominate your presenter so that I can, and you give me their name, so that I give them their presenter rights for them to share if you're going to do any slides. But ideally, if you can come up with a slide. Is that fine with everybody? Before I start pulling you guys into your group.
Fine with me.
Okay, thank you guys. I'm going to create 3 rooms. Okay, 3 rooms. Okay, it's creating rooms. 6, 6, 6, 18. Okay, there's a drop off. Okay, it's pulling people now into the different rooms. I'm just waiting for it to start pulling you guys into the rooms. Okay, I think you guys are now going into the rooms. People are leaving. I don't know which one it is, but okay, taking people to the rooms. Tenders, okay. You guys have come back. Why hasn't the guys that are still in this main room? Did you go into a room and you pulled out?
No.
It never
I
took you to.
haven't been. No.
Okay, let me try and do it manually. Let me just see who's not assigned to any room. Normally it's okay. Felicia, room 1, Harry 2. Okay, Motlalepule, you've got 2 connections. I don't know what, I'm gonna just try and pull both of them. But it shows you as, so Tabisile, yours is grayed out. I don't know why. Do you mind logging in and out? Tabisile, Bongani, and
Yes.
Gladys.
Let me log out and log in.
Yes.
Hello, Lala.
Hi.
The gadgets that I'm using today, I can't get in the group, so maybe can you assist you on that side?
So Gladys.
Hello?
Hi, Gladys, you said you can't?
Yes, the gadget that I'm using today, I can't get in a group, so maybe you can assist on that side.
So you're using your phone?
Yes, today I'm using a phone. We don't have electricity here. My laptop is off.
No, it should be able to pull you. So I don't know why it's not pulling you into. Gladys, can you log out of the class and try come back and I see if you're able, if I'm able to assign you, because it shows you as grayed out.
All right, let me try that.
Lala Bongani here, I'm struggling as
I'm
well.
back.
Get back. So you know what? To save you guys from, because sometimes I don't know why it kicks you out. Because I tried to assign Shirley Bonga, I think it was Bongani, and Tabisile. You guys can actually discuss on the main platform. The 5 of you can actually do your discussion here.
Okay.
Okay, so who I think I don't know which is left, but if you, I'll allow you guys to discuss. I'll just mute myself, and then you guys can discuss and do your preparation on the main platform, so that at least you're not missing out, because it's 4 of you. You can do a discussion.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Hello, Lala.
Gladys, I said you guys can discuss in the main platform. So you're going to discuss this Bongani, there's Tabisile, and Muhlalepule. So you guys can actually have the discussion here and decide who's going to do the presentation for you, for the group, so that you don't waste time going back and forth.
Okay.
You guys can start.
Yes.
Hello, group members.
Hello, Bongani.
Hi.
Don't know if I'm audible enough because I'm using the phone. I'm struggling with my network.
Oh, okay, same as here, Bongani. But we hear you.
Okay.
Okay,
Shall we?
we can start. I'm also using my phone, ne? In terms
Yes.
of maybe drafting and presenting, but I can be able to share the ideas based on the task that we are given.
That maybe before we can go for it, let us find out who is going to scribe for us, so that at least we'll give the points and be out.
Tabsile, can you please assist us in terms of subscriber?
In terms of jotting down the points.
The points, yes.
Okay. It's fine.
Bongani will lead us and present.
I don't. Thing is, phone if type points.
You are breaking, Bongani.
Yeah, just pardon me. My network is not good here. I'm using.
Okay, now I can hear you.
I was saying I don't have a problem presenting. It's just that actually, if you'll assist by presenting the points that we've talked about, because I can't project them over the phone.
Okay. Yes, Tabisile, we can start.
Okay. The
the task we need to discuss, outline and discuss components of an employment equity plan. But now I won't be able to share a presentation from my side. I can be able to jot down the points, but I won't be able to share with the group. I'm not sure if it's we are allowed to discuss it without sharing because I'm using a phone.
I think we have to indicate that because I also having that challenge. I'm using a phone now. Yes, maybe we cannot.
Okay.
Yes.
I think maybe it's fine if we give them our points.
Yes,
without
I think
sharing.
it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's start.
What we can do is that we will all try to write down the points, and then as I'm presenting, then we will just have to come in and add where there is an omission or an addition.
Okay.
Are we all on page 67? Where there
Yes,
is
we are.
components of equipment of an employment equity plan.
Yes, we are in page 67.
Guys, I don't have my learner guide today. I'm on the road. I've just parked out next to the road, but I will follow. It's okay.
Okay. Maybe you can even share whatever that you have based on your experience.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Under the employment equity plan, under the components, there's duration, there's broad objectives, and there's developing targets, there's allocating resources, timelines. Yes. I'm not sure if this is under allocating resources. It has also some points as well. And monitoring and evaluation and reporting. It's a lot, eh? Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
So when we start our points, yeah.
Okay. Now I wanted to say, let me suggest this. Because we are 3 groups or 4 groups, if I'm not doing. We can from the points select 2 or 3 that we want to discuss and then present only those.
That's fine. So which point are we choosing from our group that we will present?
I'm not sure. Firstly, maybe you can put it in that way. We have to initiate and implement equity program. I don't know how much it's relevant on this one in terms of the broad objectives.
Which one is it?
Initiation of an employment equity program or plan.
On which page, Mama?
Sorry, page 67.
67. Oh, okay. Let me scroll up. Okay.
Under the broad objectives, I just.
Oh, okay, yeah. What is your take from that point?
I just take one, the initiation of the employment equity plan or program. That's point number 1, the initiation of it.
Okay. Okay. My take from this equipment, why am I? Okay, from the components of Employment Act under that broad objectives, ne?
Yes, yes.
I can say maybe if the plans that are given to each and every employee, they must be specific, and the time, everyone must be given a timeline of, or the deadline of performing a task, and everyone must also meet the deadline in order for the business to be successful. I'm not sure if it's aligning with that.
Yeah, I think it's aligned because each and every planning, it has have to have a time, a duration, I mean. Yes.
Okay, I'm lost here. Our point number one for discussion is what? Because I only hear saying that we need to be specific and then it must be time allocated so that one can the time. So what is the point? Pardon me, because I don't have my study guide with me.
Okay, Tapisi, you are there.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Bongani is asking a question here in terms of number one.
Based on the point number one that we have.
Yes, the point number one that we have.
It's the one that you provided, ma.
Yeah, it's the one that
about
I'm provided.
Initiation of let me see.
Employment equity plan or program.
Okay.
Yes.
Equity plan or program.
Or program.
And I said number two, the plan must be specific and timeline must be provided where employee needs to meet the deadline.
Yes, you said that.
Okay, we can also add that everyone must be aligned with the objectives of the business. Because if you're not working according to the goals or objectives that needs to be achieved by a business, you won't be performing.
Yes.
So I don't know how we can put the point.
Okay, guys, sorry, man, I was just trying to see on my phone if whether or not I cannot get the study guide. It seems I'm winning. Which page are we on?
Page 67.
67.
Okay, let me just see if Yeah. 7. No. I'm in the wrong. The purpose of monitoring and evaluation.
You've got the wrong study guide.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not sure if Bohan is still searching. Talepula is still there.
Yeah, wow. Yes, Phila. Yeah. Ngale phone. Ngiseklassini kahle kahle. Na la.
Bongani, you are still searching. Chabisile, you are in.
Yes, I'm still here.
Where is Bongani? How
No,
many we are? How
he's
many we
still
are?
searching. It's
Because
fine. You
it's
can
like,
just.
Hello,
Yes.
I'm here also.
Who's that? Zita.
It's Kanyiso.
Tabiso. Oh, okay.
Kanyiso, K-A.
okay, can you, so what is your contribution?
Yeah. I heard what you said before. I'm not sure if I'll be out of line, but when I say the component employment equity plan must inclusive of transformation relevant to the organization.
Employment equity plan
Must be inclusive of transformation relevant to the organization as one of the objectives.
There's no wrong answer.
There's no wrong answer.
Yeah, I think that there is no wrong answer.
Okay, Kanyiso, can you
Okay.
help me again? I'm very slow. You said employment equity plan must be inclusive
Of transformation
of transformation, okay.
relevant to the organization. So that it be able to set targets. What are affirmative action measures and barriers and new targets to be met to address question of transformation in the organization.
Can I please, officer?
I'll give you 15 more minutes just to sum up your points.
So can I please come? I was relevant with the organization, of which it simply means that in every organization look at its challenges in terms of the equity plan, seek to address directly. That is the point. Am I correct?
Can you repeat, Bongani?
I'm saying the point that Kagiso has raised now. I just want, if I'm on the right path, to say transformation relevant to the organization, which means each and every organization have different challenges in terms of equity. So which means each organization must come up with a plan that will directly address its challenge in terms of equity. For example, we talked about whether you want to, in the product class, whether you want to address, let me say, a question of saying that there are more colored people than is within that. So what we're trying to say here is that let us come up with a to address that. I just want to know if I'm in a correct path.
In as much as we are breaking, but I have a sense that that was what was in my mind.
Okay.
Addressing transformation in a broader spectrum, not just based on the color and so on, but all issues. If it's male dominating, make sure you have females. Yeah, all those things form part of a transformation.
And the demographic as well, because these days will face difficulties because of the demographics in terms of the employment and so forth.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Bungan.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay.
Can we just sum these points? And I don't know. I just need to check if I've got the correct ones, or I just sure. I don't know. Okay, the first point that I have here.
Yes.
It's initiation of employment equity and program.
Yeah, equity program of land.
Of land.
Sorry?
You said equity and program of?
Equity program or plan.
Or plan. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, ne? And then the second point that I have here, it says plan must be specific and timeline.
Yes.
Plan must be specific and timeline where employee needs to meet the deadline.
The deadline, yes, that's number 2.
And then there is another one where it says objective of the business must be shared with all employees so that they can perform to achieve the goals of the business.
Yes, that's the third one.
Employment equity plan must be inclusive of transformation relevant to the organization in order to set achievable targets. I don't know if I've jotted it in a correct way.
Kanyiso?
Yes, it's correct.
Is it fine? Oh, okay. And then there is this point that I'm missing some of the information from Bongani, which is the same, similar to Kanyiso's. Yeah, you can please help me.
Can I just come in there?
Okay. Since Ladies, I was just trying to see if whether or not I'm in line with the point number 2, the one that information must be relevant to the organization. So I was just making the analysis of it to say that we need to apply number one in order for us to have number two, that it must address whether it's color, male, demographics, and so forth. So it will depend on the organization, which are the direct challenges that they are facing in terms of the equity plan, in terms of the components of the equity plan, so that they can directly go to those challenges using our points that we have mentioned in number one, specific timeline, objectives, and so forth. Remember, Sister Sila, you are bringing this. I'm trying to prepare the presentation on my side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, Bongani. Hello?
Hello,
Yes.
I wanted just
Yes,
to add
Sisi.
3 points, ne? So I didn't point form because of time. Hello?
Yes, can you?
Yes.
Yes, I was just requesting to add 3 points in point form because of time, so that when you summarize, we have a plan that encompasses all. It's an issue of monitoring and evaluation of employment plan, of evaluating the implementation of the plan. That is monitoring and evaluation, and the disputes resolution methodology, when and then the responsible person or department to make sure to guide the process. I think that's how you make your plan. Those are the 3 points that I wanted to add. Thank you.
Okay, before you can go, Kagiso, you spoke about monitoring and evaluation of the plan. Number 2, about the dispute resolution committee.
Is the procedure to resolve disputes that arise in the process of plan implementation.
Okay, I didn't get your number 3, say.
What?
Number 3, point 3. I didn't.
The responsible person or department, a designated person that will drive the transformation in the organization.
Oh, okay. Organization.
So if I can just add one last point, I think for any successful EE, similar to BE, you need to have executive buy-in. So buy-in from your executive in the organization, because also they are involved in terms of sign-off, being it offer letters and head count. So yeah.
Having said that, as my friend, I just want to check. You're quite correct about the executive buy-in. What about the stakeholders buy-in within the organization? Your stakeholders, internal stakeholders, like we spoke about the objective that needs to be put to. And how about the union and all those committees that? How do we then include them in to get their buy-in?
So executives will be your internal stakeholders, right? And your unions are your external stakeholders. So in my space, for instance, I'm not in public sector. In private sector or in our organization, all our plans are socialized with executive directors in the organization, so that we are aligned with our reportees in terms of what they want to do. When the offer letter comes to me or to anyone that is not in line with our employment equity objectives, then we are able to pick that up, because we've been aligned with everyone in the organization in terms of these are the groups that we are hiring for this particular period, because there's this objective.
Okay. So which means we will have 2 different scenarios, because I think they will agree with me, those who are in the public sector, that even if the executive can have their buy-in, they still need, in order for them to have a fully buy-in, they still need to have to consult with the union, of
With
which we
the
are.
organized labor, yes, you have 100% Bongani, as well in the public service. The organized labor, it's a part of everything.
Yeah. Okay.
If I may ask a question, and so organized labor, they subscribe to NEPAD, correct?
Sorry?
They subscribe to NEPAD and the objectives of NEPAD, organized labor.
It's a union.
Yes, correct.
The unions.
Yes.
You are right.
Okay, so okay, that's fine. All right. Okay. So my take would be, given that employment equity is one of the points within NEPAD itself, unions will have to subscribe to that or adhere to that because they already have signed to be party to the NEPAD resolutions.
You are 100% correct, my brother. But remember that in the NEPAD is the broader structure. So
Okay.
we cascade it down to the organization. So remember that each and every organization will be having its equity plan, but which is in line with the approved one from government. So it will depend on the on our point number 2, the one for transformation relevancy to the organization. So it will depend on that one. So remember, in government, what happen is that the organized labor to that specific man, hence they have signed at the national level. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
You are making sense. Thank you, sir.
You're making sense, Bongani.
All right.
I've got a request. All right. When we are presenting, some of the points that we just discussed now, I couldn't jot them down, but can we all participate when presenting? I will read now point number 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's 4 points that I have. And then can we all just jump in and present and just like a discussion?
Okay.
Yeah.
Can
Please.
can we just have a relook at point 2?
The one where we said the plans must be specific.
I think somewhere there where you spoke of you mentioned something like the specific of the plan, and also you spoke something like the
Timeline.
official, sorry,
Timeline.
yes, just that, yes, yeah.
Okay.
Can you repeat it? Can you read it again?
A plan must be specific and time. They must be specific and timeline where employee needs to meet the deadline. No, something is not. Yeah. Can you correct me on that part?
No, I didn't hear you well. Now
I think
am
it's-
hearing. I'm trying to digest it.
I think it should read the it must be specific with clear timelines.
Oh yeah.
Are we on point 2 where we said transformation relevant to the organization?
No, it's not that one.
Not
The
that
second
one.
one. The second point. The first point is initiation of employment equity program and plan. And then we said plan must be specific.
Okay.
With clear timeline where employee needs to meet the deadline.
Is it employee or the employer?
It's employees who needs to meet the deadline.
Deadline for?
Which
It's
is
the employer.
provided.
It has to be the employer. The employee can't have a deadline on EE. It's the employer that has a deadline.
Oh, okay, it's fine. So plan must be specific with clear timeline where employer needs to meet deadline. Does it sound?
Yes.
Yes,
Makes sense. Makes
Yes.
sense.
Okay. And the third point, its objectives of the business must be shared with all employees so that they can perform to achieve the goals of the business.
Correct.
And then the last one that I jot down, its employment equity plan must be inclusive of transformation, which is relevant to the organization in order to set achievable targets.
Correct.
Yeah.
Just before,
Yeah.
isn't it, she says the employment equity plan must be inclusive of transformation. Here's my question. Is the employment equity not an instrument of transformation on its own?
It is.
It is.
So, okay, will I be wrong if we say we can just rectify maybe our statement to say it must be inclusive of transformation? Because that legislation on its own is an instrument of transformation. I don't know.
It's one of the elements of transformation. So, sorry, I joined late. I didn't understand the question, because if you say the question says include transformation as one of the elements, I would say the question somehow should be rephrased, because employment equity, like you clearly said, it's one of the elements or vehicles towards transformation. So you cannot include that in your discussion or in a presentation, because you're taking one of the elements of transformation being EE, you're discussing that component, then you'll talk about different things, your ownership and so many elements out there that speaks to transformation.
Okay. I think what we're missing, we are all saying all the right things. It's just that now what we need to is to structure our presentation as Sister Tapsile was doing, if I'm not mistaken. So what we both say, what we are both saying is quite correct. Remember, the transformation must be relevant to the organization. Yes, it is the transformation plan, but it has to cascade down to the organization in order to the transformation relevant to each. For example, you will find out that there is an organization that has a high number of certain race that is being employed. So which means the transformation plan will be to address that. For example, recently I hear that this camp said they've got top their management team, it comprises of white people. So what they want to do, they want it to be inclusive of black people. So what they will do, they will consider more of which that is their transformation plan that is relevant to their organization at the point in addressing the challenge that they are having on top of the table. So I think we are all saying one and the same thing. It's just that we need now to work on the structure of the presentation. Thank you.
So do we need to change this statement, or what needs to be done here?
The statement remains according to me, unless otherwise if there is a dissenting view.
Yeah, I agree also. The statement remains. The key element of the transformation is that the relevant to the organization. I think Box explains it further in a clear way. You must not just talk about transformation in a broad sense. Look at the equity plan must comprise of exactly zoom in what transformation you want to address in the organization. What kind of transformation? That's the matter of that transformation relevant to the organization, not in a broad sense of transformation.
Yes.
But the relevance.
Apologies. I think I'm a little bit confused. When you say relevance to the transformation, Would you mind repeating that, sir, please?
No, I mean, Bongs explains it, ne? When you say transformation relevant to the organization, your equity plan must look at the shortcomings in your company in terms of affirmative action and so on, demographics and so on. If it's male dominated, make sure your equity plan address the issue of parities amongst men, addressing that discrepancy. If it's about issues of color and so on, it should specifically deal with the issue of color. Hence, you'll have an example of this camp, because the problem in this camp is higher management. It's not transformed. So equity plan must address to deal with that matter, because you'll find downward the line in the labor spectrum, you find all labors in the what you call the people who are on the ground. There are too many blacks, but they in the management, they is only whites. If you just holistically deal with the question of numbers in checking the equity there, you'll find there are many blacks in this camp than the white people. But now, when it comes to echelons of power, the main decision making, that's where you do not find black. So your equity plan must be able to specifically address this relevant problem in the company. I think I hope I'm clear.
Hi everybody. Everybody is now coming back into the main platform.
Okay. So Tim, please help.
All managed to conclude.
Okay.
So just a question, guys, before we do the presentations. Do you want us to do the presentations now before we go for lunch, or do you want to go for lunch first and then come back and do your presentations?
Lala, I will suggest that let us do the presentation. Maybe we can deal with the discussions thereof after.
All right. Is everybody fine with that? All right. Thank you, guys. Who wants to go first? I know the main room had, intense conversations. But who wants to just go first and represent their teams? Is there any group that actually managed to drop anything that they want to physically present on the platform, or you're just going to be reading from your notes?
Yeah, let the main room
And we will be reading notes, Lala. I don't have those resources to. I don't have those resources to do a presentation. I just jot the notes down, and then the team will be able to jump in and help me towards the last points.
Okay. All right. Thank you. You can go ahead.
Is everyone back?
Yeah, room one is also back.
Yeah. Everybody's back now.
Oh, okay. All right. The points that we have regarding the discussions of components of an employment equity plan. We said initiation of employment equity and program initiation of employment equity and program and plan. And the plan must be specific with clear timeline where employer needs to meet deadlines. And the other point that we have, it's objectives of the business must be shared with all employees so that they can perform to achieve the goals of the business. And employment equity plan must be inclusive of transformation, which is relevant to the organization in order to set achievable targets. And the team members can jump in to add more points like the procedure to resolve disputes, all the discussion that we had towards the end, please.
Thank you, sis. What we're trying to say here is that when we say initiation of employment equity plan, is that we we understand that there might be challenges in terms of the equity plan in different organizations and in the broader spectrum where this transformation of equity has been discussed before. So now we are saying is that it must be taken down to the organization to identify what are the challenges that needs to be addressed by the specific organization. So the reason why we are saying that it must be there must be an initiation of the equity plan and the program within that organization. So when we say it must be specific, as I've said, that it must look at what needs to be addressed, timeline, objectives, and so forth. Then number two, when we say that transformation must be relevant to the organization, we made an example with this camp to say they've identified, to say that in their top management, they've got too many white people than blacks. It's not a race, it's a thing that they find. And then they've engaged in an equity plan that say, we want to transform these. And then they cascade it down and say that in our next intake and the training manager programs that we are going to have as the transformation plan is that we are going to employ more black people into management position. So they've got a specific timeline objective, and it was well communicated to all the employees so that they can support the objective of this camp. And then it further says that when we say it must be relevant to the organization, we are saying it must look in everything that might be the challenge in that specific organization, including of the gender demographics and so forth. I think I will leave to my team members to add on the 2 points that have been mentioned. Thank you.
Now, thank you, colleagues. Just to add, the plan must consider, must have a monitoring and evaluation plan strategy so that we can trace whether the plan is working and implementable. And also, once there are problems, we must have a dispute resolution mechanism in place. Because when you implement a plan that of that nature, definitely will cause conflicts. So the company must not be found wanting. The plan must give space how should happen in case of conflicts. And also, for accountability purposes, there must be a specific person designated to drive, to implement the plan. Thank you.
Is that all, guys, from your side?
Yeah, we can make the decision that the most important thing about the components of an equity plan is that there must be executive buy-in, because without them buying in into this, and the organized labor must be consulted with the plan, so that at least when we move, we all move on a very same page. We mustn't find ourselves where we're moving as an organization only to find out that at the later stage, the organized labor will be coming with objections in the plan that has been presented.
Just to add the last point on that one in terms of executive buy-in, one of the things that we do, and I made an example to a group that in private sector, we as Bongani just said, it's a mandate of the executives to make sure that one, the plan is socialized within the organization and all the executives buy into that. But further to add, it becomes also part of the performance areas for executives, that in your area, you ought to have X number of people that are in line with our transformation. And if you're not meeting those objectives, obviously from a appraisal standpoint, you are found to be wanting because you did not meet the objectives.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, the main room, for your contributions and actually making time. Just a question, guys. In terms of, I remember, I think Tabisile, you mentioned the transformation part, that it needs to be. Can you just reiterate for me? You said it needs to be a tool for transformation. Is that correct?
We said it must be relevant to the organization in order to set achievable targets.
And then the element of transformation, there's a part you mentioned transformation.
I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's Kanyiso who added more points on that about transformation.
Oh, okay. Kanyiso, do you mind just repeating that statement in terms of the transformation?
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And now I say what we're saying is that the transformation, the plan must include it must include a transformation relevant to the organization, the transformation component that intend to be addressed. Hence, Bongane will go back to issue of an example of Discam. Because if you can check in overall Discam as a company, you'll find there are many black people employed there. So now if you look on that scale, you'll say 51% of employees are black people, only to find that we are talking about the ground force, the ground workforce, the tellers and so on and so on. But the echelons of power in the directorship where the decision making is happening, no black person is represented. That's what their own study found. So that the relevance of their plan now must not just encompass everything, address the issue of black and white. It must go to where is the problem? The problem is in management. There are no black managements. It's only one-sided. So your plan must be able to address that specific problem that is relevant in your organization. That's what we are trying to push with this point.
Oh, okay. So just if I can summarize to say that in terms of your affirmative measures and your income differentials, where you're saying in terms of your different salary structures, it should actually show that with you trying to accommodate everybody and having that fairness within your structures, you're giving every employee from the different designated areas fair changes when it comes to salaries and also allocation into higher positions.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's
all right. Thank you so much, guys. Are there any questions for the team, or can we move on to room 1? Okay, let's save the questions. Room 1, please. So that we just have them at once. We don't.
Thank you so much for giving us this platform. The question was saying we have to outline and discuss the components of an employment equity. We first discuss the purpose of this act, which we have said is for promoting equal opportunity and fair treatment in employment through the elimination of unfair discrimination, implementing affirmative action measures to address the disadvantaged and employment experienced by designated groups to ensure their equitable representation in all professional categories and level in the workplace. Now, which we took on the designated groups, which are including Africans, colored Indians, women, and disabled people. Now we focused most on the disabled people because in most various, we don't see a lot of disabled. It seems as they are discriminated. We were looking at on how are we going to implement this plan. We have discussed that the place which they are going to work on should be safe and also conducive environment. Now we came on the strategies that we need to use before we can employ the disabled people. We say we need structures should be in place, and those structures should have ramps. And beside those ramps, there must be safety signs from where they are starting to show that we are going to find a ramp in that particular door. And we also had a planned duration that we should undertake, which is not is less than a year, but it's not more than 5 years. We pause it there in group 5. if there is somebody who can also add, can also add.
Is there anyone else from group 5? Or we can say you guys are done. I think that thanks a lot. I think Simbine for sharing on behalf of the group. Oh, Nomnebo. Sorry. Please go ahead.
Hello, Lala. Okay, I'm not sure which group I was in when you were putting us on groups, because when I went to the group, my screen just became blank. So I'm not sure which group I was in. Then I wrote something on the side just to present. Can I continue?
Yes, you can go ahead. Thank you, Simbine and your team for your contribution.
Thank you.
Can you see on your side which group I was in, Lala?
Hold on, let me just check. Just give me a moment.
She was supposed to be with us, group 1.
Oh, group
Yes.
1.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. I couldn't, I was talking, but they couldn't hear me. My screen was blank. But can I see what I've written aside? I've written just something for the group.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The question was prepare a mini presentation for the following outline and discuss components of the employment equity plan. It is important that the employers apply affirmative action in accordance with the law. The employees and trade unions representatives need to know what is employment equity, and the plan represents the critical link between the current workforce profile. The plan prepared must state the following: the objectives to be achieved for each year, the affirmative action measures to be implemented, and the duration of the plan, which may not be shorter than a year or longer than 5 years. The person in the workforce, senior managers and all, are responsible for monitoring and implementing the plan and any other prescribed matters. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for that addition.
Okay.
Room 2. Are the guys still there? I think room 2 and room 3 are still
Load shedding.
No, load shedding has slowed down. It happens at night nowadays when we're sleeping. It's quite behaved. It's giving us time to watch the football. Room 2 or room 3, are you guys ready to just give your feedback or just any additions from what you feel the other guys maybe left out? Okay, I think they've gone for lunch. They've disappeared on us.
Hello? No, you're not alone.
Okay, so all right, I will. They don't want to share their ideas. That's fine. Okay, hopefully in the next session they will also participate. Just to say, guys, from your side, when you're taking on that responsibility within your organizations to manage employment equity, just to know what should I include in the policy, right? In terms of one, what should it speak to in terms of the objectives of your equity plans? Who needs to be involved in terms of your committees, right? Also looking at your budgets, what can you accommodate in terms of your financial backing from your organizations? Where if you're trying to speak to maybe the disability section in terms of your affirmative action, do you have the resources to actually go and adjust your infrastructure to accommodate, that designated group? So also look at that side of your planning side, and also make sure that from your side, whatever you're deciding in terms of your equity plan, you're sitting at a strategic level and incorporating in your objectives as you're planning for your departments, your organizations, to say this is what we intend to do, and does it speak to actually meeting the objectives of the organizations, one in terms of the equity, and also making sure that the people actually are able to meet the objectives of the organizations. Also look at that, and also putting in place how do you monitor that the plan has been put into, has been implemented and is effective, right? Because it's very important to say, have a follow-up structure that you're going to use within your organizations to try and monitor, the progress of any policy that you're going to put into your organizations. And also understanding in terms of how are you supposed to then report at the end of the day to say, yes, you've compiled, you've done the recruitment, you've done the hiring, you've manage to get the people in the system, but also understand from a government side in terms of how do you then submit, the documents. What are you supposed to submit to Department of Labor, to say one, the two forms that they require from organizations, to say submit one that gives you a breakdown, or just give you part of that show the EEA2, right, Employment Equity Act Form 2, that you're supposed to give now a breakdown of your employees component, to see these are the people that we have. This is the future the future recruitment that we're going to look at in terms of our employees, and also looking at now the breakdown of the financials of your employees is another form that you submit, right? It happens, I'm not sure, I can't remember, I think it happens is it February or May? I can't remember when you're supposed to submit it, but there's always a reminder from Department of Labor once you're doing that function within your organizations, where they'll send you a reminder to say it's time for you to submit your reports, right? So just make sure that they are submitted on time, so that you're not exposing your organizations to fines for not submitting the two reports, and also giving a breakdown of your employee salaries, where you're also trying to make sure that from your employees, how are you breaking down the salaries for the employees from the different designated groups? Is the fairness within your organization? So just make sure from your equity plan, you're also trying to restructure when it comes to how you pay everyone within the different structures. Is it fair from how your remuneration packages are sitting in your organizations? Are you able to make sure that people from these different designated groups are also getting equal remuneration packages in comparison to people that are already there in organizations from the other groups that were not previously disadvantaged? So that's just in a nutshell that you need to look at when you're looking at employment equity and how you incorporate it in your organizations. Just adding. So when you have a small section for the day, we're just going to look at section, I think it's 6, what is it? Sorry guys, let me just check. 5.11 on national minimum wage, which is just a small section to see how within HR why we should incorporate that. And then from there, I'll let you guys go and work on your POE. So at least you work on the sections that we've done up until now. You slowly start gathering your information and compiling your POE. What is the deadline again, guys, for your submission?
I think 13 January, if I remember well.
30 January. Sure. Wow.
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thereabouts.
So you got 2 months. That's a lot of time.
No, it's not 2 months. It's a month, because we're finishing this. We're finishing this on Friday. December.
When is it?
Okay, I just opened here. It's 9th of Jan, yeah.
9th of Jan.
Oh, 9th of Jan.
Yeah, 9th Jan.
And with all the holiday festivities, you might find yourself on the 8th of Jan, you don't have a full POE.
No, it simply means we don't have December.
No, so remember, as whenever we finish and you have that time that remains that are allocated, guys, go and work on your POE if you can.
If you can, that's an operative word.
Yes, if you can, just work on it. The little that you remember, a little every day helps at the end of the day. To say, if I've managed to do one section, by the time I'm sitting where I'm officially free, I've got a few levels left, you know, a few sections to do. I guess I'm just trying to get to where I was. Hans, I've asked Futali for question 2, right? So just give me feedback. Question 3, let me just, I'll check what question 3 was about. But I've asked for the guys to check what's missing on that question, and they'll come back to me. But you can skip that in the interim and do the other ones, you know, so that you're not being held by one section. Do the other sections that are straightforward, and then the part where we're doubting in terms of what's supposed to be there. Once we get the feedback from Vitali, you can always go into
Question what? Sorry.
Question 2 from your formative activity. I'll just check which one. Hold on, I'll just check for you which one it is. Just give me a moment. I don't know why this my system is a bit slow, guys. Sorry for that. So I think it's rebooting from the lunch break. Okay, so just here. Give me a moment. I'll just check for you which section it is for. Let me go into the POE. Just give me a moment. It is from. It's been on the one on performance. Just hold on. Okay, so formative activity 6. Question 2. We're just waiting for feedback on that, guys. Question 2. And then Hans, can you just help me just remember the other question was which one that you pointed out? Let me just see from your chat. Question 2 and 3 of activity 5. Okay, question 2 and 3. Okay, and question 2. Okay. Wow. Okay. Thanks for that. We'll sort that out, guys, and I'll give you feedback. So just the last section for the day, guys, minimum wage, right? Because remember, the government has put in place at least, you know, a pay limit that we can't go under in terms of how we pay our employees or remunerate our employees. Try and also bring in that alleviate our employees from brackets of poverty. Because remember, when you're looking at the standards of living and the cost of living, right? To say with the salaries that we're offering employees, would it be able, right, to accommodate all the prices of basic commodities and give them at least something to survive on? So with that put in place, we're trying to make sure that our employees also have, you know, a comfortable pay structure to accommodate all the different changes in the costs. So when with the minimum wage, right, one, you're trying to make sure that you improve employees that are lowly paid, because you see from your salary scales, right, within government, from your 1 to 12, make sure that within those ones, who is falling under, you know, minimum wage, if they any, right? Make sure that you look at what is the standards in terms of minimum wage. Are you not paying people under that limit? Because if then you're under the limit, then you're operating with, you know, unfair practices in terms of expectations from the minimum wage. Sorry, guys. So in terms of activities today, I'll let you know just in a bit, right? I think I wrote them in, I've got them on of my slides, the ones that you're supposed to complete today, but I'll put it up on the screen just in a moment, okay? And then secondly, why they put in terms of having a minimum wage to protect employees, right, from one being paid low salaries. Because imagine if you're paying an employee 1.5 and you're looking at the cost of living today, especially if you look at the prices, you know, prices are very exorbitant, even just for basic commodities. And if you're paying them anything below that, you then your employees, if you're actually concerned in terms of the well-being of your employees, because remember, as HR, as people that are managing people, we need to make sure that in terms of our employees' well-being, are they able to actually have a decent, you know, standard of living? So from that minimum wage then comes in place to also try and accommodate that. Okay. And then just looking at one, how do you also make sure that in terms of within the employees having collective bargaining and with your unions in place, how have you made it in place that one, they actually go and represent the employees and come up with, you know, a substantial amount in terms of your bargaining councils to say that the employees actually have a minimum wage that we can all say across the bar, everybody from this, you're not allowed to go under, under this minimum wage. So within the different bargaining councils that we have within our organizations or within our different spheres, it's then important that they can go and look at one, what is the cost of living? How do we make sure that at least there is a fair amount that we can put across the board to accommodate employees' standards of living? So that's also put in place when you're looking at the minimum wage. So as HR, always make sure that as you're sitting down and looking at the salary scales of your employees, to say no one is being given any package that's below the minimum wage. Is everybody at least being fairly paid within your organizations? And depending also with the different grades that you have within the government, how do you then make sure that, you know, everybody within the different scales has a salary that's not below the minimum wage? How do you also pay employees in terms of one, the grades that they have from your salary grades? You see once you go onto the minimum wage and Public Service Administration Act, what it says in terms of how employees are paid within that sector. So just make sure that you bring in a form of equality in terms of your pays within your organization, that no one is unfairly, you know, paid within your organizations, and you have a platform where you sit down with executives, you sit down with management, and actually advise them in terms of the salaries and the limits in terms of how low you can't go within your organization. So that's just a guideline for employers, for employees also to know in terms of them asking for salaries, depending on one, at what level are they coming in, what can they ask for, and what should they not accept in an offer. Because remember, when you're taking an offer, it then shows you what's your salary. And if you're coming in surely on an entry level, you then can't say in terms of what the Minimum Wage Act says in terms of what a person should be paid. This is the lowest that you can then offer a person. If it's below that, then you can go back and say that it's not within what legislation says. Can you try and adjust it, right? But from what the legislation says, it also says that in terms of national minimum wage, it doesn't apply, right, to certain areas of employment where if you're a volunteer, right, you are paid according to if they want to give you an allowance, right? So there's a stipulated amount that you're supposed to be given, or even if they don't pay you, because remember you're doing voluntary work, so it doesn't affect people within that sphere. And National Defence Force and National Intelligence Agencies, they don't operate under the National Minimum Wage Act. They have different policies that they follow within their setups. When you're looking at the national minimum wage, guys, have you had exploitation of employees or exposed or seen within different articles or even the news where there has been exploitation of employees in terms of, you know, getting paid under the national minimum wage? Any news on that, guys? Any stories that you've read? Pardon?
Domestic workers that are underpaid.
Okay. Domestic workers. do they actually then go and lay a complaint, or it's one of those where if they're misinformed, because sometimes it's an issue of not getting that information and you get exploited because of that basis?
I think even domestics are much more informed than they were before, so they know their rights, they know what the minimum wage is, and people do tend to exploit them. So sometimes these cases end up at CCMA, and there's those kind of disputes.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Faye. Any other scenarios, guys, where we've been exposed to people being paid under minimum wage? Any news on that, guys? So just make sure from your side, when you're doing salary scales for employees, whether it's private sector or, in the public sector, at least in the public sector, you have, you're operating under that authority. So ideally, they would follow, in terms of their own legislation. But coming from the private sector, if you're coming from the private sector and you're managing that process to say within, your different pay scales for your employees, just try and maintain that you're operating within expectations of what the national minimum wage is. If it's at, I think currently it's at 23 Rand, I think 23 Rand, and I think it's about 19 cents per hour that should be paid to an employee, so depending with what work that they're doing and what have you asked for, make sure that you're not paying them anything under the minimum. And if it's a person that's working on a full-time, make sure that you then calculate what is a full-time person should be getting and what is the lowest that you can't go under, so that you're also protecting the organization. Because remember, whatever you're doing with all the legislation that is there within HR is to make sure that you adhere and you're complying, right, to expectations of the legislation, and also protecting the organizations in terms of them not exposing themselves to any fines, any situations of getting cases where employees are laying grievances against the organization. So it's very important that as an HR person, you make sure you stay up to date in terms of what are the changes within legislation, what do I need to make sure that I accommodate for when it comes to policy, from whatever has been put in terms of compliance for organizations, whether it's basic conditions of employment, your national minimum wage, your Public Service Act, your Skills Development Act. What are the different areas that you need to make sure that you incorporate in your policy, so that you're also protecting the employee and the employer in that relationship as they create, as they're trying to meet the objectives of the organizations. So it's very important as HR, even just from your side, to understand in terms of what does the legislation say, what are my expectations, that I should also know as an employee, so that I understand in terms of protecting my rights and not putting myself in a situation where I'm exploited because I don't have that information. So just make sure from your side, you also keep yourself acquainted in terms of what is going on with legislation, what are the changes that are putting in, what are the different adjustments that need to be accommodated within contracts, within agreements, within any policies that organizations have. So that's just basically in terms of your national minimum wage act, right? So from the sections that we've done today, guys, we've done we've done rewards for employees. So rewards and recognition of employees, right? To say what does that entail. We've looked at equity within organizations, where we defined what equity is, where you're also supposed to look at how do you make sure that you've got an equity plan for your organization, what is making sure that you also report in terms of equity, including, yes, Letlhangwanalo?
Sorry, if I may ask, and it's a broad question, what factors did the government take into account when they enacted the national minimum wage? Did they factor in economic factors in there, or was it just to say we are putting this in place to curb the potential exploitation of employees? Therefore, we're just going to come up with a number. So what was the science behind, I think, is it 3.5, something like that? What was the science behind the amount? I understand the logic, but what science informed the actual number.
Okay, thank you for that. Guys from the floor, does anyone want to attempt that? In terms of why did the government decide, let's put in this salary, let's put in this minimum wage in place? Anyone from the floor? But I can just give in terms of from my side, from my understanding, to say that from the the different when they're doing valuations and trying to see that disparity when you're looking at a person that's coming in on an entry level, right, from into the job market and the ones already there, to say in terms of that differential, right, to say that what is the best way to give at least a minimum amount that you can say from a person that's coming in from zero, looking at what's happening in the environment, what is the cost of living, what is at least a decent amount where a person can afford, right? To say you can pay for rent, you can able to buy basic basic needs in terms of your survival. Because remember, when you're looking at how what motivates people or what drives people to say, people look at meeting their basic needs, right? Basic social needs as fulfillment at the beginning, right? This is your foundation when you're looking at what Maslow says when it comes to someone's got music on. So from that, in giving affordability to someone that's coming in on an entry level, to say, okay, at least this amount, looking at the cost of living, the adjustments in terms of what's happening in the environment. Because someone is playing music, guys. Let me just mute them. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to mute from my side, right? So when you're looking at those bases to say, okay, let me try and make sure that at least even if a person is coming in at an entry level, with that amount, they're able to afford a decent, a decent lifestyle where they're not one staying in an area in a bracket of sitting in poverty, right? You're able to pay for accommodation, you're able to buy food, you're able to pay for transportation. So they had to do those calculations, because remember, you're then sitting with people that have to evaluate what's happening in the economy, what are the prices that are there within the economy that we're operating in. With that, then you're able to also help in terms of, let me put in an amount, right? Also looking at how do I move people from an area of living in a bracket of poverty, where if I'm paying a person 1,000 rand as a salary, would that be able to cover their basic needs? Would they be able to have decent accommodation? Would they be able to go to work? So moving away from exploiting employees and giving them at least a comfortable amount now that pushes them to say, okay, now I've been given an amount that will give me basic needs. If I want anything beyond that, this is where now people then get driven to say, okay, let me now work on progressing in terms of my qualification, progressing in terms of my career, and move away from just getting a minimum wage that just gives me access to basic needs, and I can now afford now the luxuries, and also upgrade myself if I can able to go and pay for my own fees, and look at also what's happening in terms of policy, economic policies that are within the countries. Sorry, I see there's hand raised.
Okay, it's me, Lala. I just wanted to add on that. I think they did look on the minimum wage policy, because if the minimum wage is set too high or is increased too much, this may have unexpectedly large impacts on the labor costs that the employers must pay. Yeah.
So thanks, Namlebo. But okay, from Leslongano's side, he's saying in terms of actually coming up with the act, because remember when the government was putting up acts, it would have seen that there's a gap in terms of how things are operating, right? Find the adjustments are there in terms of how do we then peg the amount, or how do we increase, right? Whenever we're increasing the amounts. But in terms of actually the inception of the act, what was the foundation of saying let's have a national minimum wage act within our economy? What was those driving factors? That's what Lehlongolo was asking. Lehlongolo, did I, from what I said, because that's also just from experience and exposure to say, did it help in terms of your question?
To an extent, it does. When you look at point 3, it says preserving the value of the national minimum wage. So I see, and so, okay, point 1, improving the wages of lowest paid workers. When you juxtapose 1 and 3, I'm kind of now looking at the current economic terms and inflation and all sorts of things, and say, oh, what value are you actually talking about? And when you're saying improving the wages of lowest paid, from what point? What is your point of departure to get to 3.5? So I'm just struggling to kind of consolidate the rationale behind the enactment using this reasoning. And also, I don't know if there is anywhere where it talks of a review of the minimum of the national minimum wage. Is it like this until people start complaining, or it's going to be an annual review to it to say it should be increased? So yeah, those are the things that I'm kind of struggling to consolidate in my not so small head.
Okay, I think from all the policies that enacted within how government operates, to say they have renewal periods. Remember, with every legislation, if there are changes within the environment that they're operating in, they're supposed to say by certain date, this is valid for what period. When should we make sure that we look at reviewing what the minimum wage is? When do we sit as a committee and look at what changes need to be made? And remember the value that they're putting in to say that let's make sure that we have an amount that we will not, that an employer should not pay a person, right? To say within the workspace, let's give a certain amount, let's give a value in terms of minimum wage, where we're saying that let's not exploit employees. Let's make sure that as we're hiring people, as we're being hired, we're having to say in terms of this agreement, let's not go anywhere below what this amount says. Because remember, from when they said let's include or let's have this national minimum wage, they had seen that there's a gap in terms of anyone that's coming on an entry level or who's doing certain roles, that they're being paid very low amounts. So let's now look at how to make sure that in terms of protecting what people and having a minimum wage, let's now incorporate it into now our legislation, so at least we can protect employees going forward and also have these standards in terms of how employers will pay employees. So someone can just come to you and say, okay, I'll pay you 500 for your service because that's the value I put. But now the government said, okay, let's try and put in, standards within, that agreement where no one will get exploited, and they'll try and maintain that going forward. And if there are any changes within the environment, whether it's changes in prices or there is interest rates that have changed that are now affecting in terms of the cost of living, then they have to do that adjustment. But depending on what are the set dates that they've put in their policies where they should review these amounts.
So Lala, just from a HR standpoint, right? So okay, let me backpedal a bit. There's many articles that are coming out where people are literally now quitting their jobs to say, I literally work for transport. And as a result, there's no need for me to go to work. And it's a reality. So organizationally, from an HR perspective, what would be your advice to the business to remedy this, because it's a real problem? So think of an organization where you have about maybe 20-30% of your workforce are on national minimum wage, and all of them, they resign as a result of there's no need to work. I mean, we're crying. Price of diesel is literally 28 rands. So you can imagine what that does for the whole month if you're traveling and all sorts of things. So what will be your and looking at different disciplines within HR, what will be your advice to the business, or maybe remedial actions?
Okay. So when you're sitting in that scenario, right, you then go back, say, in terms of budgets, right? Do we have affordability in terms of adjusting salaries for employees? Looking at one, you have to sit down and say, for the employees that are sitting within those amounts where they can't afford and they've stressed out that, things are very bad and tight for them, right? Do we have affordability, right, as an organization to adjust their salaries? Secondly, in terms of their roles, right? Because remember, as HR, you're also trying to say where one can the organization save and where can we maybe merge in terms of responsibilities, right? So you have to sit down and say, okay, there are these 10 jobs that are sitting, at low salaries, right? From these, right, how crucial are they within the organization? Is it possible that maybe we can break down in terms of one way we retrenching people, right? To say we can't afford to give people salaries that they're looking for. But if we're to break and maybe leave a few people, then we're able to, manage and give them, decent salary. What is the situation that we're sitting in? Because it all comes down to affordability. Can we afford as an organization to give people those allowances, or do we have different resources? Maybe we have transport within our business where we can say, okay, for our employees that are within this pay range, right, we're going to have a transport system that you get picked up, or we can adjust in terms of giving you a transport allowance where you're seeing, is it cheaper for me to say, let me give you a transport allowance, right? Let me give you a transport allowance. Let me maybe put in a transport system for my employees that are sitting with this problem. Or if I can, with my organization, where we said, you know what, we've overlooked and not given the employees, a fair salary, looking at what the economy looks like and the cost of living. So maybe let's give them a 3,000 on top, because we can have that affordability. So it all depends with what the organization has, and in terms of need for those different roles, where you can say, maybe let me move, right, this person to the next level, or let me train them and they're able to then go into the next role where they can actually get a better salary. So you then have to look at what are the options that you have within an organization. What can you then offer the employee, so that at least you're trying to make sure that you save up, right, that agreement or that employee. So you try by all means keep a balance to say, okay, at the end of the day, make sure that both parties are happy, the employer and the employee. What's the best remedy that you can give both of them, so that everybody walks away, kind of happy from the agreement? So it all just depends what access you have in terms of sorting that situation. But ideally, companies should look at what is now the current cost of living, and what has inflation changed on. Can you put it, accommodating on top of what that inflationary amount is, so at least it also gives people an amount where they're comfortable enough to afford the basic needs, because we shouldn't be ignorant what's happening in the environment, where we know everything is going up, and from you just going, into a shop and seeing how much is a bag, a bottle of oil, how much is just sugar, just those basic needs, and you seeing the increase, and that someone is sitting on a salary of a certain amount, and what are the and that some of these people have kids, you still have kids, people have to come to the office just decently, with that amount that I'm paying them, warrant them to be able to give that service and have a comfortable, standard of living. So we also have to do, research, and also, know what's going on in the economy, and not, turn a blind eye and say people will manage. That's just what I think.
Okay, thank you.
What would you do, Lehlangana, if you had that power? Okay, you're sitting with employees,
No,
and
probably you would have picked up that I don't believe in the minimum wage, right? simply, not simply, sorry, I always get reprimanded for using that word. For the reasons that when you look at a basket of food, according to economists, you'll realize that minimum wage actually it's a further insult to people. Same way that you'll pay your helper according to your minimum wage and say I'm within the law. I think it's a but anyway, those are just my. So what I'll do is I think I'll operate outside of the minimum wage based on my objective as the organization. I think and it goes to cohesion within the organization to say I may be earning X amount of money as a director in the organization or or as a senior manager in the organization, but what does the current how does the current economic terms affect the rest of the employees in the organization? Earlier on, we were talking about performance. These are about some of the things that will affect people because there's no motivation to come to the office. If you're gonna be left with 500 runs every month that you have to manage to last you for the rest of the month outside of transport. So looking at people's basic needs, for me, I think it's important as an organization, which is something that we do, to say, are we paying our employees according to the means, and so we do compare ratios in private sector. We look at what are the global trends in terms of the positions, and we benchmark people according to global trends, and that goes on review on a yearly basis in terms of are we paying within the certain level. It goes with the gradings and all that. And the people that are the lady that is cleaning the office and a whole lot, we make sure that she's paid outside of the minimum wage because we want a certain level of performance. So when you I don't think you can look at it in isolation. I think there has to be a conversation that says, what sort of culture do I want to build? If I want to build a culture of high performance, part of it has to do with what is it? What are the pain points that your employees have? And when you incorporate those into your thinking, aligned with the type of culture that you want to create or you want to build in the organization, that it informs how you also remunerate people. So those are about some of the things that I will look at. And if it means getting to a point where you say, executives will probably, instead of a 6% increase, will get a 4.5% or 5%, and the rest will go to
I think we lost him. Is Lana still there? I'm not sure. I think he's going to come back. Oh, Lehlangano, you're back.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there. I think somebody started touching me. So yeah, those are about some things that I would look at, because the thinking shouldn't be around the confines of a certain legislature or act. Should be informed by what is it as an employer that you want to do and that you want to achieve. Of course, the guidelines will be there, but you are not restricted to operate within those guidelines to say, no, but I'm paying you, which is the argument that a lot of people in public sector will make, to say, but I'm paying you according to minimum wage. Okay, then that's fine. Organizationally, how does that impact you? Because you end up having a lot of people resigning and people coming in, and you don't realize that it actually costs you money because the people that leave, they're living with a certain element of IP. You bring in new people, you have to dedicate time to train them. That costs money from a training and development perspective.
Thanks a lot, Lehlangano. Thanks.
It's Lehlogonolo. You have digressed, not Lehlongonolo. Lehlogonolo.
But I'm trying. At least give me a point for
You got it
trying.
right the first time when you said you added the N, Lehlongonolo. It's Lehlogonolo.
Okay.
On a lighter note. On a lighter note.
Thanks for that. So just just to add, to say when the government is putting in these scales, is to say at least let's not go anywhere below this amount, but now organizations have to come and say, like what you're saying, let's now look at my organization and my affordability and the color of the people, the culture that I want to have within my organization, and also the standard of living that I want to make sure that I give my employees, because you want everybody to be comfortable, right? So you then have to decide, say, okay, at least, yes, some people don't even look at the minimum wage. They'll come and say, okay, in terms of the standards that I want for my organization, I want to make sure everybody can afford this type of lifestyle. Okay, so whether it's entry to, they'll start with good packages. They won't even look at, even sometimes when you look at that annual leave accumulation, some organizations will come and say, okay, I'll give you your accumulate leave at a maybe a 2.5 per month or 3, depending with organizations. They don't even look at what's the lowest that I can offer a person. They're looking at motivating the employees. They're looking at making sure that the employees are happy at the end of the day. So the government just comes in and says, well, let me at least try and have guidelines. Let me have at least a platform, where people won't get exploited. But from there, it's then important that as the employer, you then look at how substantial is this amount, looking at where we're living and where we sit it as an economy. Is this going to be able to give a person a decent lifestyle, or that person barely survives? They have their salary. I was reading somewhere, it was actually a joke where it says you get paid today, your money is finished in 2 days. For the rest of the month, you're working for free because you don't have anything, right? Because you've already finished the money that you've been allocated. But yeah, it's important now as employers, we try and see, are we actually awarding our people enough money for them to have a decent lifestyle, with they're not always just wanting and not coming to borrow, where you're always signing papers for employees to say, okay, they're getting into debt because they can't actually afford, because you see them as you're managing that whole process, say actually the employees can't afford, can't have a decent lifestyle with whatever amounts that you're paying in your organizations. But yeah, thank you for that. Any additions, guys, before we go to the last point of the day? Any additions? Any comments, guys? Okay, there's nothing that anybody wants to add. You can always share later, guys. So that's the end of the 3 sections that we've done today, right? From your side, guys, make sure you complete your formative activities, right? So the ones that we covered today would be from activity 8 and 9, right? So just make sure you go. So from 1 to 9, just try by all means to slowly start working on those formative activities. Because remember, you guys, we're now going in, we're in December. Oh my, it's December tomorrow. We're already in December, and there's so many things that happen within December, in terms of you taking a break, you attending to your families, and just trying to shut down. If you can, with the times that I allocate in terms of doing the formative activities, if you can work on them now to reduce the pressure and also allow you to have adequate time with your families, because everybody just waits for this time to zone out and fully dedicate themselves to their families. So if you can, with the time that I'm giving you, so it's now 2:00. So you're away from work. Your work knows that you are unavailable till 4:00. Okay, so you have 2 hours, guys, to go and start working on your formative activities for the ones that we've done, for the areas that we've covered today, and the other sections that we did from Monday. Any questions on that, guys, before we close off and I let you guys work on your POE? No questions from your side, guys? Okay. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much, guys, for your contributions and just participating in the class. It just helps in terms of hearing different ideas, hearing different experiences from everyone that's in the class. It also helps in terms of, gaining more knowledge, because nobody knows everything. At the end of the day, we're all in a learning process, So thank you all for, sharing your different experiences, and see you guys tomorrow for since tomorrow will be our day 4 of our session, but please just work on your POE. Yes, I want now I'm too scared to pronounce your name. Yes, Mr.
No, it's
Mbuli.
fine. All right. Are the assessors for our POEs, do you have different assessors for different modules or using same assessors? Let me tell you why I'm asking, and it's a question that we asked. I think a couple of us on this course are in the private sector space, right? As a result, most of our responses or inputs in the POEs will be informed by or partially informed by our experiences and exposure in private sector. Will that be taken into account as well? Are they all mindful of that? I don't know if it's a question that you can answer or Vutali. Yeah.
So remember from the questions, I think from what I read through, the questions ask you in terms of just how your organization operates, not specifically that you're in a public sector, because remember, they know that people are coming from different sectors. Not everybody is within the public sector. So it asks you on the basis of where are you right now and how does it work, right? If it's a question that specifically says within the public sector, how is this done? This is where now you'd go and research to say, okay, how is it actually done? Because remember, you have access to, to Google and hearing and listening to, or whatever, hearing from the government side what is happening. But most of the questions ask you from your organization that you're in, if I'm correct. So you can give your feedback from where you are.
Okay, merci.
Sorry. Did you hear my feedback?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So no, it's not that you're penalized because you're not in the public sector. It's general questions. In terms of the assessors, I think that's something that Vutali can answer, but I think they use different assessors. But no one will penalize in terms of, because we don't assume that everybody is from the public sector. It's different people coming in to get a qualification within the public sector. I hope that helps.
Well answered, thank you.
If there are no more questions, guys, I think we can end here. Please go work on your POE. I am begging. We don't want anyone missing the deadline. Okay. So if you can, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Lala. We'll try.
We'll try. We'll try.
Yes.
Please do your best. You need to rest in December, so make sure you finish it now. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Hey, in December.